On a quiet September morning, I was trimming white roses in my Beacon Hill kitchen when my son called. "Mom, Dad drowned last night," he said. Before I could breathe, he added, "He left everything to me. The house, the flower business, the accounts. I'll bring the papers today. Just sign them." I stood frozen, staring at the roses in my shaking hands. My husband of 41 years was supposedly gone, but my son's voice sounded too calm. Hours later, my phone rang again. A weak voice whispered, "Don't sign anything. I'm still alive." Then the line went dead. This story isn't easy to tell, but it's one that matters. Before we start, drop a quick comment for me. What are you doing while you listen? Driving, cooking. Just sitting quietly, I truly read everyone. Quick note, certain details have been adjusted for storytelling, but the heart of this, the message, is what I hope stays with you. The phone call came at 7:15 on a Saturday morning in September, while I stood in my kitchen with rose sap still fresh on my hands. I'm Joyce Myers, 69 years old. For 35 years, I've started every morning the same way, standing at my Beacon Hill kitchen counter, with white roses and a pair of German steel shears, arranging stems before the rest of Boston wakes up. The ritual anchors me. The roses don't judge, don't demand, don't disappoint. They just need water and attention and a steady hand. That morning, the light came through the window in golden sheets the way September light does when autumn hasn't quite committed yet. My Earl Grey sat steaming beside the cutting board. The roses were from Thursday's wholesale delivery. David Austin blooms the ones that open slow and smell like honey. I was trimming the third stem when my phone buzzed against the marble counter. The screen read Lyle, my son. 42 years old. Calls maybe twice a month usually when he needs something or his wife Ilaria reminds him it's been too long. I set the shears down, wiped my hands on the towel, and answered. Ernest had been gone for 5 weeks by then. Lyle had managed the absence with careful excuses, a fishing retreat in Vermont, then a wellness program, then, "Dad needs space, Mom don't push." I had believed him. I had believed my own son for 36 days before the morning everything stopped making sense. Mom. His voice carried that particular tone I'd learned to recognize over the years, rehearsed careful like he was reading from notes. "I have bad news. Dad drowned last night." The words hit me in stages. Dad drowned last night. I opened my mouth, but Lyle kept talking, his cadence shifting from mournful to something else entirely. Something cold. Fishing accident in Vermont. It was peaceful. He didn't suffer. A pause that lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then, "Mom, we need to talk about the estate. You can't manage $8.5 million in assets alone. You're a flower lady. You arrange bouquets. You don't understand corporate structures or tax implications or trust management." I stood there holding the phone, watching dawn light crawl across my kitchen floor. Ernest, my husband of 41 years, dead, and my son was already talking about money. "Lyle," I said, but he rolled over me. "The Beacon Hill house needs to transfer to me immediately. The floral chain, all 8 stores, needs professional management. Holloway Blooms has been your hobby, but it's a $4.2 million asset that requires actual business expertise. The retirement accounts, the investment portfolio, everything. Ilaria has a finance degree from Wharton. She understands these things. You understand flowers." Ilaria, his wife of 3 years, born Vanessa something or other, until she decided Ilaria sounded more sophisticated. I'd watched her redesign my son's entire life, his wardrobe, his vocabulary, his opinion of his own mother. "Where is he?" I asked. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, flat, mechanical. "Vermont State Police have the body. I'll handle arrangements. You just need to sign the asset transfer documents. I'm sending them today. Power of attorney trust, restructuring, business succession. It's all standard. Don't embarrass yourself by trying to understand the legal language. Just sign where Ilaria marks." What kind of son calls his mother at dawn to deliver death news and inheritance demands in the same 60 seconds? I looked at the white roses on my counter. Their stems bled clear sap where I'd made clean cuts. In the language Ernest taught me 30 years ago, white roses meant truth. Red meant courage. Lavender meant devotion. We'd built a whole vocabulary out of flowers because he was a senior federal IRS auditor who couldn't always say what he meant out loud, and I was a woman who'd started a floral business in our garage when Lyle was 6. "Lyle," I said again, "I need to call you back. Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Dad's gone. You're 69 years old. You have a heart condition. The responsible thing is to let someone younger handle the complexity while you—" The line went dead, not because I hung up, because he did, mid-sentence. My son announced his father's death demanded $8.5 million worth of assets and hung up on me before I could ask a single question about funeral arrangements, or how it happened, or whether Ernest had been alone. I set the phone down on the counter. My hands were shaking now just slightly. I picked up my tea, but it had gone lukewarm. The roses sat in their glass vase, perfect white blooms catching the morning light. And then I realized something. I wasn't crying. 41 years married, the love of my life allegedly dead in a fishing accident 12 hours ago, and I was standing in my kitchen completely dry-eyed, thinking about the cold, transactional tone in my son's voice, thinking about the phrase, "flower lady," delivered like an insult, thinking about Ilaria's Wharton degree weaponized as proof of my incompetence. But mostly I was thinking about fishing. Ernest hated fishing. 41 years of marriage. Not once, not one single time had Ernest Myers voluntarily gone fishing. He tried it on our honeymoon because I suggested it. Lasted 20 minutes before declaring it the perfect activity for people who enjoy wasting time while torturing worms. He was a man who loved crossword puzzles and historical biographies and Saturday morning farmers markets where he could negotiate wholesale prices on seasonal produce. He was methodical, precise, allergic to pointless leisure. Fishing, Vermont, alone, overnight. The detail lodged in my mind like a splinter. Small, sharp, impossible to ignore. I looked down at my hands. Rose sap had dried in the creases of my palms, leaving faint green traces. My wedding ring, plain gold, nothing fancy, caught the light. 4 decades. You don't spend that long married to someone without learning their patterns. Ernest's Saturday mornings meant Coffee Globe crossword, arguing with Red Sox radio commentary, not fishing rods and Vermont lakes. Lyle's voice echoed in my head. "You're a flower lady. You understand flowers." He was right about that much. I did understand flowers. I understood that roses bloom because you tend them patiently season after season. I understood that some things look dead in winter, but their roots stay alive underground. And I understood that when something doesn't make sense in a garden, you dig until you find out why. I set the phone on the counter and looked at the white roses, my hands still carrying the scent of fresh stems. Ernest had taught me their language 30 years ago. White for truth, red for courage, lavender for devotion. Standing in my kitchen with dawn light breaking through the window, I realized I wasn't ready to grieve. I was ready to dig. I pulled the phone directory from the kitchen drawer and started with Vermont State Police, pen poised over a fresh legal pad. 41 years of marriage had taught me that verification beats grief every time. The dispatcher answered on the 3rd ring. "Vermont State Police, how can I help you?" "I'm calling about a drowning accident. Lake Champlain, last night. Ernest Myers, 72 years old." A pause. Computer keys clicking. "Ma'am, we have no reports of drowning incidents in that region in the past 48 hours. I wrote that down, asked about other lakes, Burlington area, anywhere within 2 hours of the state line. Nothing, no reports, no body. I moved to hospitals. Same script each time, checking on a patient admission, Ernest Myers, 72, possible drowning victim. No record, no record, no record. By 9:30, I'd called 11 facilities across Vermont and New Hampshire. Ernest Myers didn't exist in their systems. I set the pen down. 11 calls, 11 negatives. One conclusion: Lyle had lied. The question was why? I was staring at my notes when my phone vibrated. Unlisted number. I almost didn't answer, but instinct made my hand reach for it. Hello? Static. Then a voice I'd known for 41 years, raspy and weak, but unmistakably his. Maggie. My maiden name, the one only Ernest used. Ernest! My voice cracked. "Where are you? What's happening?" "Don't sign anything," he was whispering, urgent. "Whatever Lyle brings you, don't sign. I can't—" The line cut dead. I stood there holding the phone, heart hammering. 8 seconds, maybe less, but I'd heard everything. The fear in his voice, the warning. Ernest was alive, conscious, and trapped somewhere he couldn't speak freely. I tried calling back. Generic voicemail. I left a message. "I'm here. I heard you. I won't sign anything." Nothing came back. The morning stretched into afternoon. I made more calls: Ernest's golf club, his book group, the coffee shop on Charles Street. Nobody had seen him since Friday. I was making a timeline when the doorbell rang. 2 o'clock, exactly. I looked through the peephole. Lyle stood on my porch. Next to him was a stranger, mid-40s charcoal suit leather briefcase, the kind of polished professional veneer that came from expensive law schools. I opened the door. "Mom," Lyle said, "this is Preston Blackwell. He's handling Dad's estate." Preston extended a hand. His grip was brief, and his eyes never quite made direct contact, the mark of a man used to operating in legal shadows. "Mrs. Myers, he said, "I'm very sorry for your loss. We need to move quickly on these documents. Time-sensitive transfer protocols. Your husband's wishes were very clear." They walked into my living room without waiting for an invitation. Preston set his briefcase on my coffee table and clicked it open. Inside was a thick manila folder. He dropped it on the table with a deliberate thud. The will, transfer documents for the floral chain, power of attorney for the accounts. Everything's been prepared according to Ernest's instructions. Lyle leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Mom, we talked about this morning. Dad signed everything before he passed. He knew you couldn't manage this alone. Ilaria has a finance degree. She understands capital structures, tax optimization, trust management." He paused. "What have you ever done besides arrange flowers for other people's parties?" I looked at my son, at the man who'd called me a flower lady like it was an insult. "I'll need my own attorney to review this first," I said. Preston's expression didn't change. "Of course, but understand that delays create complications. Estate taxes, probate timelines. The longer we wait, the more your assets erode." "How much time do I have?" "We'd prefer to file by Tuesday. 3 days. Lyle wanted me to sign away everything in 72 hours. I reached for the document stack, hands trembling just slightly. Not from fear, from rage I couldn't let show. I flipped through the pages, legal language dense enough to hide anything. And on the final page, Ernest's signature. I stared at it. The familiar loops of his handwriting, the way he pressed harder on downstrokes. And then I saw it. The backward hook in the word Holloway. Ernest always ended his H's with a small upward curve to the right, but this one hooked sharply backward to the left. A tiny deviation most people would never notice. But 30 years ago, when Ernest worked as a senior federal IRS auditor investigating organized fraud, we'd developed a code. Backward hooks meant one thing: do not comply. I am under duress. I'd seen that signature exactly 3 times in our marriage. Once during an audit where the target had threatened his family. Once when his dying mother's estate was being manipulated. Once when a business partner tried to force a fraudulent contract. And now on documents claiming he was dead. I looked up at my 42-year-old son standing over me, demanding I sign away 41 years of my life. "I'll need a few days," I said. Made my voice quiet, tired, the voice of a woman who'd given up. Lyle's eyes narrowed. "Days for what?" "To think, to process, to understand what I'm signing." He wasn't expecting that. Good. The best traps are the ones the prey builds themselves. After Preston and Lyle left, I waited exactly 30 minutes, long enough for them to believe I was broken. Then I grabbed my keys and drove to State Street. The law office of Desmond Quincy occupied the 12th floor of an old brick building, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out onto a gray Boston harbor and the rain that had just begun to fall. Desmond Quincy, 55 years old, sat behind his mahogany desk with the quiet authority of a lawyer who had spent 25 years protecting the elderly from their own families. Silver hair, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, a fountain pen resting beside an open legal pad. The office smelled like old leather book bindings and strong coffee. He stood when I entered. "Mrs. Myers, please sit down. Tell me everything from the beginning." I sat in the leather chair across from him and started with the 7:15 phone call. My son's voice announcing his father's death and demanding assets in the same breath. The Vermont verification, no drowning, no body, no record. Ernest's 8-second warning from an unlisted number. Preston Blackwell appearing with a stack of documents, the signature with the backward hook. Desmond listened without interrupting. His pen moved steadily across the legal pad, taking notes in precise handwriting. "The signature had a backward hook," I said. "Our private code from 30 years ago. It means he's being coerced." "Your husband is a retired IRS auditor," Desmond said. "He knows how to document evidence. For 41 years. And this power of attorney your son is using, when was it executed?" I pulled out the document Preston had left. Desmond studied it under his desk lamp. 3 weeks ago, he said quietly. "Mrs. Myers, your son, planned this a month in advance. Minimum." The words settled in my chest like stones. 3 weeks. Lyle had sat across from me at Sunday dinner 3 weeks ago, kissed my cheek, asked about the hydrangeas in the garden, and he'd already signed the papers to take everything. "This isn't greed," Desmond continued. "This is premeditation. False imprisonment is a Massachusetts felony. Forged will constitutes federal document fraud. Each layer is deliberate calculated." He set the document down and looked at me directly. "How much are we talking about?" $8.5 million total. The Beacon Hill house is worth $2.8 million. Retirement accounts another $1.5. And Holloway Blooms, my floral chain, is valued at $4.2 million. Desmond nodded slowly, making more notes. "The business, tell me about that." "I built it from scratch 35 years ago. Started in our garage when Lyle was 6. Now it's 8 stores across Boston and Cambridge, wholesale and retail." "And your son has been involved in management?" "Never. He went into venture capital, called the flower business beneath him." Desmond's expression didn't change, but I saw something shift behind his eyes. Recognition. He'd seen this pattern before. He stood and walked to a filing cabinet against the wall, pulled a folder and brought it back to his desk. 18 months ago, he said, "You came to this office. You'd just been diagnosed with a heart condition. You wanted to protect your assets." I remembered. The arrhythmia diagnosis. The fear that I might die suddenly and leave Ernest vulnerable. "We established an irrevocable trust," Desmond continued. "The floral chain was transferred into it, protected from creditors, from lawsuits, from any future power of attorney claims." He slid the document across the desk. "Mrs. Myers, your son, cannot touch Holloway Blooms. Not with a POA. Not with a guardianship order. Not with anything. The trust is irrevocable. You built a wall he didn't know existed." The relief hit me so hard I had to steady myself against the chair arms. $4.2 million, I said. "He can't access it. Not a single leaf of that asset." I looked out the window at the rain streaking down the glass. Lyle had planned this for weeks, maybe months, but he'd miscalculated. The business he'd dismissed as flower arranging beneath him, beneath notice, was the one thing he couldn't steal. Desmond's desk phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then looked back at me with an expression that made my stomach drop. "There's something else," he said. He picked up a paper from his printer. Fresh ink. Court filing. "Your son filed an emergency petition yesterday for guardianship of you." The words didn't make sense at first. "Guardianship. He's claiming you're mentally incompetent to manage your own affairs, age-related cognitive decline, unable to make sound financial decisions. He's asking the court to grant him full legal authority over your person and property." I stared at the document, at my son's name on the filing, at the list of supposed symptoms proving my incompetence. "When is the hearing?" "Friday morning." 6 days. The clock had been running all along. "Friday," I repeated. "We have 6 days to find Ernest, expose the fraud, and prove I'm competent." "Yes. Can we do that?" Desmond didn't answer immediately. He looked at me across the mahogany desk, this woman 30 years his senior, who just learned her son was trying to steal everything and declare her insane. Mrs. Myers, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've seen every variation of elder abuse this city can produce, and I've never had a client walk into my office with a cipher from her missing husband. Your son made a mistake. He underestimated you. He picked up his desk phone and dialed from memory. Candace, I need you, right now. A pause. Elder abuse case. Husband missing son filed guardianship assets at stake. Another pause. 30 minutes, thank you. He hung up and turned back to me. Candace Stafford, best financial investigator in Boston. If your husband is in Massachusetts, she'll find him. And if your son has been moving money, she'll track every dollar. I nodded. Outside the window, the rain was falling harder now, Boston Harbor disappearing into gray mist. Mrs. Myers, you need to understand something. We're not just fighting for your assets. We're fighting for your freedom. If that guardianship goes through, you lose legal authority over yourself. Your son controls where you live, what medical care you receive, who you're allowed to see. I understand. Good, then let's get to work. I walked out of Desmond's office into the rain at 5:30, emergency guardianship petition folded in my bag. 6 days until Friday. 6 days to find my husband, expose my son, and stop a plan that had been months in the making. I thought of the lavender in my kitchen. Ernest's word for ready. I wasn't ready yet, but I would be. Candace Stafford called me at 6:30 Sunday morning, 18 hours after Desmond hired her, and she already had answers. I drove to South Boston through empty streets. Her office occupied a converted warehouse, exposed brick 3-monitor workstation, humming under fluorescent lights, the air thick with dark roast coffee and 18 years of investigative precision. Candace stood when I entered. Late 30s, sharp eyes behind frameless glasses, the kind of focused intensity that came from spending too many years tracking other people's lies. Pinecrest Private Care, she said without preamble. Newton, 20 minutes from your house. I sat down in the chair across from her desk. 20 minutes. Ernest had been in prison 20 minutes from our kitchen for how long? Days, weeks. The facility isn't fully certified by the Department of Public Health, Candace continued. They're operating in a legal gray zone. Memory care without full licensure. The kind of place families use when they need discretion. She slid a document across the desk. Pinecrest admission record. Ernest's name. The date 3 weeks ago. The POA was executed 3 weeks before he disappeared, she said. This wasn't spontaneous. Your son has been planning this for at least a month. I stared at the date. 3 weeks. The Sunday dinner with the hydrangeas felt like a lifetime ago. There's more, Candace said. She pulled another document from a manila folder. Medical certificate. Official letterhead. Dr. Raymond Harding signed the dementia certificate. He's Pinecrest's chief physician. The diagnosis claims severe cognitive decline, inability to manage basic activities of daily living, danger to self and others. Ernest is 72, I said. He does the Globe crossword in under 20 minutes. He manages a retirement portfolio that's outperformed the market for 10 years. He's sharper than half the people in this city. I know, Candace said quietly. Dr. Harding also went to UMass Boston with your son. Class of 2003. They were roommates. The air left my lungs. A 20-year friendship, I said, not a medical assessment. Correct? I looked at the certificate, at Dr. Harding's signature, at the lies typed in clean medical language. Can I visit him? I asked. Ernest, can I see him? Candace's expression told me the answer before she spoke. Your son listed himself as sole authorized visitor. You're not on the approved list, Mrs. Myers. 20 minutes. My husband of 41 years sat in a locked room 20 minutes from our kitchen, and I wasn't allowed to see him. Then we find another way in, I said. Candace nodded. I'm working on it. She handed me a business card. Pinecrest's address. A phone number. Don't call yet, she warned. Any contact alerts them. We need surprise on our side. I left her office with the documents in my bag and drove home through Sunday morning quiet. The city looked normal. People buying coffee, walking dogs, living ordinary lives where sons didn't imprison fathers and forge medical certificates. At 2 o'clock, I was back at Desmond's office. Conference room this time. the three of us around his mahogany table, me, Desmond, Candace, with her laptop displaying a financial spreadsheet that made my stomach turn. Thin September sunlight cut through the windows. Outside, Boston moved through at Sunday afternoon. Inside, we were building a case. "There's something else," Candace said. Her voice had changed. Quieter. The tone of someone about to deliver bad news. "Something that changes what we're dealing with." Desmond leaned forward. "I traced your family's financial accounts going back 12 months. Candace continued. "Bank records, investment activity, insurance policies." She turned the laptop screen toward me. "Mrs. Myers, this isn't just about theft anymore." The spreadsheet showed a list of transactions, dates, dollar amounts, and at the top, highlighted in yellow, a life insurance policy. Insured Ernest Myers. Beneficiary Lyle Myers. Payout $2 million. Execution date, February 14, 2023. 8 months ago, Candace said. February 14th. Your son took out a $2 million life insurance policy on your husband's life. The sole beneficiary is Lyle Myers. Your name doesn't appear anywhere on the policy. I stared at the date, February 14th, Valentine's Day. I'd spent that day at Holloway Blooms managing the holiday rush, long-stemmed roses by the hundreds, arrangements for dinner reservations and surprise proposals. The store had been packed from opening to close, and somewhere across the city, my son had been signing paperwork that assigned a dollar value to his father's death. Valentine's Day, I said. My voice sounded strange. He signed his father's death warrant on Valentine's Day. Desmond set his pen down with deliberate slowness. "Mrs. Myers, this changes what we're dealing with. This isn't asset theft. This is premeditated murder conspiracy." "Can we prove that?" I asked. "The policy alone establishes motive," Desmond said. "Combined with the false imprisonment, the forged medical certificate, the guardianship petition, yes, we can prove it." Candace pulled up another document on her laptop. Bank statements. "Your son has been systematically draining accounts for 8 months. Small transfers. Nothing that would trigger automatic fraud alerts. But it adds up to $3.2 million moved from your husband's retirement accounts into accounts controlled by Lyle and his wife." "Ilaria," I said. "Yes, the transfers started 3 weeks after the insurance policy was executed. February through September, every month, like clockwork." I looked at the timeline Candace had built. 8 months of theft, 3 weeks of planning the imprisonment, a forged will, a fake drowning, a guardianship petition. My son hadn't made a single impulsive decision. Every step had been calculated. "Your son assigned a dollar value to your husband's life," Desmond said quietly, "and he's been working toward it for 8 months. The question now is whether he's planning to wait for natural causes or accelerate the timeline. The insurance policy sat on the table between us, $2 million, sole beneficiary, February 14th. I thought of every Sunday dinner since then. Lyle sitting across from me, asking about the garden, complimenting my cooking, kissing my cheek when he left. How do you look at someone that closely and see nothing at all? "What do we do?" I asked. "We move fast," Desmond said. "Friday's guardianship hearing is now secondary. If your son is planning to kill his father, we need to extract Ernest before that happens, which means we need evidence, documentation, proof. And we need it in 5 days," Candace added. I nodded. Outside the window, Sunday afternoon stretched into evening. Somewhere 20 minutes away, Ernest sat in a room I couldn't enter. And somewhere else in this city, my son was counting down to $2 million. He made his choice, I said. Now we make ours. I spent Sunday night cataloging every lie Lyle had told me over 8 months. Every Sunday dinner, every phone call, every time he'd looked me in the eye while planning murder. By Monday morning, I was sorting white roses at Holloway Blooms when the front bell chimed at 10:30. I looked up to see my 15-year-old granddaughter standing in the doorway, drowning in an oversized gray hoodie, her eyes red and swollen. Lily. She hovered at the threshold like she wasn't sure she was allowed inside. "Come in, sweetheart," I said, immediately setting the roses down. "What's wrong?" She stepped through the door and the words came out in a rush. "Grandma," I heard them, Mom and Dad, last Sunday night through the study door. I guided her to the stool behind the counter. My hands were still damp from the rose stems. "What did you hear?" They were arguing. Not loud, but intense. I was upstairs doing homework, and I heard Dad's voice through the floor. I came down to the landing, and their study door was cracked open. She pulled a piece of loose-leaf paper from her hoodie pocket. It was crumpled, covered in careful handwriting. "I wrote it down right after," she said. I was scared I'd forget the words exactly. I took the paper. Her handwriting was precise despite the obvious fear in every line. Dad said, "We need the old man's condition to deteriorate naturally. Aldrich knows what to do." I stopped breathing. Mom said, "The hearing is Friday. By Saturday we'll have full control. The flower shops will be sold by spring." Lily looked up at me with those red-rimmed eyes. "Grandma, I don't know what it means." But it sounded wrong. It sounded really wrong. I read the log again. The old man, Ernest. They were planning to accelerate his deterioration, and someone named Aldrich knew how to do it. "You did the right thing," I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. "Coming here, writing this down, all of it." "There's more," Lily said. She was crying now quietly. "A nurse at Pinecrest stopped me last week, outside school. I don't know how she knew who I was." "What did she say?" "She gave me a message from Grandpa Ernest." The world tilted. "She told me to tell you the lavender is ready." Lily watched my face. "Does that mean something, Grandma?" I held the counter to steady myself. "The lavender is ready. 30 years. 30 years since Ernest and I had built that code during his extended IRS audits, when he couldn't always speak freely on hotel phones. Lavender meant ready. It meant I'm prepared to move. It meant whatever you're planning, I'm with you. Ernest was alive, conscious, coordinating. "Yes," I told Lily, "it means something." I held her for a long moment at the counter between the white roses. After she left, promising to text me if she overheard anything else, I stood alone in the shop. My 15-year-old granddaughter had walked 20 minutes from school to find me. Ernest had found a way to send a message through a locked door. I was surrounded by people fighting for me in silence. The least I could do was fight back. At 3 o'clock, I stood in my Beacon Hill kitchen assembling a specific bouquet. Red roses clustered tight with fresh lavender stems. No card, anonymous delivery. My fingers worked the wire with the fluent speed that came from 35 years of practice. Red roses meant I am advancing, hold your ground. Lavender meant ready. Combined, the message was clear. My love, I know exactly where you are. I am coming for you. Get ready. 30 years ago, when Ernest took those extended audits to Chicago every 3 weeks, leaving me home with a toddler and a struggling new flower shop we'd constructed this private language, he'd ship me arrangements from hotel concierges. I'd send them back through courier services. Whole conversations conducted in stems and petals because his audit targets sometimes monitored phones. Red for courage, white for truth, lavender for devotion, yellow for caution. We'd built an entire vocabulary out of necessity and isolation, and the particular loneliness of loving someone whose work required secrets. I wrapped the bouquet in green wax paper and tied it with simple satin ribbon. The roses were David Austin blooms, the same ones I'd been sorting when Lily walked in. The lavender was fresh from Saturday's wholesale delivery, still fragrant. I called a courier service I'd used for years. "Delivery to Pinecrest Private Care in Newton," I said. "Room 14, no card, anonymous sender." The dispatcher confirmed. "Pick up in 30 minutes." I sat at my kitchen table waiting. The afternoon light came through the white lace curtains the way it had for 41 years. Ernest had hung those curtains himself the week we moved in. I'd been pregnant with Lyle. We'd painted the whole house room by room, arguing cheerfully about colors and placement. That man, the one who'd hung curtains and argued about paint colors and built a private flower language because he loved me, was sitting in a locked room 20 minutes away. And our son wanted him dead. The courier arrived at 3:30. I handed over the bouquet and watched him carry it to his van. The confirmation text came at 5:30. Package received, Pinecrest Private Care, Newton Room 14. I stood in the kitchen and pictured Ernest in that room. His reading glasses that he always lost and I always found. His crossword book with the spine cracked from use. That particular stillness he had when he was thinking hard about something, the way his eyes would go distant and focused at the same time. He would open the flowers, he would see the red roses and the lavender, and he would understand. 41 years of marriage, and we had learned to say everything in 4 minutes when we needed to, or in a single bouquet delivered through Boston streets to a locked room I still couldn't enter. I thought about Lily's log, about the words deteriorate naturally, about someone named Aldrich who knew what to do. And I thought about Ernest receiving those flowers, reading the message, understanding that his wife of 41 years was coming for him. He wasn't alone, not anymore. Whatever Lyle had planned, whatever acceleration Dr. Harding had arranged, whatever timeline they were working toward, Ernest would be ready, and so would I. I sent the flowers Monday evening. By Tuesday morning, I still hadn't slept. Not from terror, not from panic, but because my mind refused to quiet down, cataloging every fact with the methodical precision of a florist, planning a spring planting that would need to survive a killing frost. At 5:45 a.m., heavy fog blanketed Beacon Hill. I sat in the master bedroom armchair by the bay window overlooking an empty street. My mug of Earl Grey sat beside me untouched. Since midnight, the bergamot scent gone cold hours ago. Outside, the streetlights made halos in the fog. Boston at dawn has a particular quality, the city holding its breath before commuters and delivery trucks break the silence. I'd watched this view for 41 years. The same brick facades, the same wrought iron railings, the same narrow sidewalks where Ernest and I used to walk after dinner when Lyle was small. I pulled out a legal pad and started writing. 8 months. That's how long ago Lyle took out the life insurance policy. February 14th, Valentine's Day. While I'd been managing the holiday rush at Holloway Blooms, my son had been signing paperwork that assigned a dollar value to his father's death. 3 weeks. That's when the power of attorney was executed. Before Ernest disappeared, which meant premeditation, not crisis. 20 minutes. That's how close Pinecrest was to our kitchen. Close enough that Lyle could visit any time. Far enough that I'd never accidentally drive past. Dr. Raymond Harding, Lyle's college roommate. 20-year friendship weaponized into a fraudulent dementia certificate. Preston Blackwell, the attorney who moved through legal shadows. Eyes that never made direct contact. I wrote it all down in neat columns. Facts, dates, dollar amounts. The same way I'd organize flower varieties by season, which needed full sun, which tolerated shade, which would survive frost, which required protection. 35 years of running a business teaches you systems. You don't build 8 stores from a garage startup without learning to break complex problems into manageable pieces. At 6:30, I took my heart medication. Daily ritual I refused to break for any emergency. The cardiologist had been very clear 18 months ago after they'd placed the stent. Avoid high stress, take the pills on schedule, monitor for symptoms. The irony wasn't lost on me. My son was trying to kill his father and steal everything we'd built, and I was supposed to avoid stress. I swallowed the pills with a full glass of water and went back to the window. Dawn was starting to burn pink behind the brick chimneys of Beacon Hill. The fog was lifting in patches, revealing the street below in fragments. A runner passed, then a dog walker, then silence again. I thought about Ernest in room 14 at Pinecrest. Did he receive the bouquet yesterday evening? Did he understand the message? Did he know I was coming? Red roses and lavender, I am advancing, hold your ground. Get ready. 41 years. In 41 years, you learn to speak in code when you need to. When Ernest was doing those extended IRS audits in Chicago and couldn't always talk freely, we'd built an entire language out of flowers. Whole conversations conducted in arrangements shipped between cities. I wondered what he was doing right now. 6:45 in the morning. Was he awake? Did they let him have a window? Did he have his crossword book? Or had they taken that too? 35 years of growing things teaches you patience. The kind that watches bulbs sleep through winter, knowing exactly when the frost will break and green shoots will push through frozen ground. You learn when to give more light, when to hold back water, when to cut something down, so something else can reach the sun. You learn when to wait. This required that same infinite patience. The kind learned from roses that take 3 years to root properly. The kind that doesn't panic when nothing visible happens for months. But you also learn when waiting is over, when it's time to move. I looked at my legal pad, the neat columns of evidence, the timeline stretching back 8 months, the dollar amounts and dates and locations. Lyle thought he was stealing from a flower lady, a woman who just arranged bouquets for other people's parties, someone who didn't understand capital structures or legal documents or how money really worked. He'd miscalculated. I'd spent 35 years building a business from nothing, negotiating with wholesalers, managing inventory and payroll and seasonal cash flow, expanding from 1 garage shop to 8 locations across Boston. Holloway Blooms hadn't survived 3 recessions and countless competitors by accident. It survived because I knew exactly when to be patient and exactly when to fight. At 7 o'clock, I stood and pulled on my wool coat, grabbed my car keys from the dresser. More ground to cover today. Desmond would have updates. Candace would have more evidence. And somewhere in this city, my son and his wife and their attorney were still counting on me being too old, too confused, too broken to stop them. I didn't know yet what Ernest had done his first night at Pinecrest. I didn't know what he'd seen, what he'd figured out, what quiet war he'd already begun fighting from inside that locked room. But after 41 years of marriage, I knew one absolute certainty. Ernest had taught me the flower code during those Chicago audits because he was methodical, strategic, always 3 moves ahead. He'd built a career at the IRS tracking financial criminals who thought they were smarter than the system. He could do a Globe crossword in under 20 minutes and manage investment portfolios that outperformed professionals. The man who'd hung our kitchen curtains and argued about paint colors and built a private language out of roses wasn't sitting quietly in a locked room doing nothing. He was observing, documenting, planning. 41 years. In 41 years, you learn to trust what you can't see. The root systems growing in darkness. The husband fighting from a locked room. The spring that always follows winter if you just wait long enough. I drove through the early morning streets of Boston with that thought sitting heavy in my chest and the quiet certainty that whatever Ernest had already set in motion, I needed to be ready to meet it. I would find out soon enough. What I knew as dawn broke pink over the harbor was this. We'd been married 41 years, and in 41 years, Ernest Myers had never once done nothing. By Tuesday afternoon, I was back at Desmond's office. Candace had called at noon saying she'd found something. The way she said it made me drive faster. Desmond's conference room felt different that afternoon. Pale autumn light cutting through the windows. Candace's laptop already open on the table. And something in her expression that made me sit down slowly before anyone said a word. "I ran a deep background check on your daughter-in-law," Candace said without preamble, "going back 10 years. She turned the laptop screen toward me. A Connecticut court record filled the display. 3 words across the top, Defendant Celeste Hartwell. "Ilaria Myers used to be Celeste Hartwell," Candace said. I looked at the name, at the date 2018, at the case number. "I don't understand," I said. "Who is Celeste Hartwell?" Candace scrolled down the document. Bridgeport, Connecticut, 2018. She ran an investment fraud scheme. $890,000 stolen from 14 families. Working-class people who trusted her with their retirement savings. The number sat on the screen. $890,000. "The case was settled out of court," Candace continued. "Records sealed as part of the settlement, but not entirely erased from state archives, not if you know where to look." Desmond leaned forward. "Your daughter-in-law has a criminal record," he said. "Identity theft, securities fraud. She legally changed her name after the settlement and moved to Boston." I stared at the screen, at the woman I'd known for 3 years as Ilaria, the woman who'd corrected me when I called her Vanessa at their wedding, the woman who'd sat at our Sunday dinner table talking about capital structures and market volatility. "There's more," Candace said. Her voice had gone very quiet. She scrolled to the second page of the court filing. Another name appeared under co-defendant. "Preston Blackwell, your son's attorney," Candace said. "He was Celeste's co-defendant in the Connecticut fraud. They ran the scam together. They were more than business partners." She pulled up another document, a deposition transcript. They were lovers, Desmond said, reading over her shoulder. They ran the fraud together, split the money, settled the lawsuit. Then they disappeared from Connecticut records entirely. I sat very still. The conference room suddenly felt too small. Lovers. Not business partners who met through Lyle. Lovers who ran a scam in Connecticut 5 years ago and decided to do it again with a bigger target in a different city, using my son as the key. After the 2018 settlement, Candace continued, Celeste Hartwell legally changed her name to Ilaria Myers. She relocated to Boston, created an elaborate backstory, old money family finance, MBA from Wharton Summer House in the Berkshires. She married Lyle in 2022, I said, 4 years after the Connecticut fraud. Yes, Candace confirmed. The entire marriage was reconnaissance, infiltrate the family, gain trust, map the assets, then bring in Preston as the attorney to execute the theft. Desmond picked up his pen, set it down again. Mrs. Myers, this changes the nature of what we're fighting. Your son isn't the architect here. He's the mark. Celeste and Preston targeted your family the same way they targeted those 14 families in Bridgeport. They just got more sophisticated. I thought about the wedding. Ilaria in her white dress looking at Lyle like he was everything she'd ever wanted. The way she'd cried during the vows. All of it performance. All of it calculated. Does Lyle know, I asked, about her past? Candace shook her head. Nothing in our investigation suggests he has any idea. He thinks he married old Boston money. He has no idea his wife is a convicted fraudster with a stolen identity. I sat with that. Lyle, my son, who'd spent 3 years telling me I wasn't sophisticated enough to understand his wife's world, who dismissed me as just a flower lady while holding up Ilaria as the pinnacle of financial expertise. And all along, the woman he worshipped was a con artist who'd changed her name and moved cities to avoid her criminal record. How many Sunday dinners had Ilaria sat at our table, smiling across the roast chicken, praising Lyle's business acumen, subtly undermining my competence? How many times had she looked me in the eye and lied about her background, her education, her entire existence? 3 years. 3 years of calculated deception. The Wharton degree, I asked. Doesn't exist, Candace confirmed. She attended community college in Connecticut for 2 semesters. No degree. The family money, fabricated. Her parents ran a used car lot in Bridgeport. Both deceased now, no estate. The summer house. Never existed. I thought about Lyle's voice on the phone Saturday morning. The contempt when he'd said, "You're a flower lady. You arrange bouquets. You don't understand corporate structures or tax implications or trust management." He'd elevated Ilaria as everything I wasn't, everything I'd failed to be. The sophisticated, educated, financially savvy partner who understood the world in ways his simple mother never could. And she was a fraud, literally. A woman who'd stolen her identity and her credentials and her entire backstory. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. I'd spent 35 years building a legitimate business from our garage, 8 stores, wholesale and retail, surviving recessions and competition through actual work, actual strategy, actual competence, while Ilaria had spent the same years running cons and stealing money and constructing elaborate lies. And my son who'd called me just a flower lady, had chosen the fraud over the real thing. Mrs. Myers. Desmond was looking at me with concern. "I'm fine," I said. And I was. In a strange way, this made everything clearer. Lyle hadn't fallen in love with someone superior to his mother. He'd fallen in love with a performance, a construct. A woman who'd studied him the way a hunter studies prey, determined exactly what he wanted to hear, and became that person. She'd played him perfectly, found a man who resented his mother's lack of sophistication, fed that resentment, elevated herself as everything he wished I'd been, and then used that position to convince him to steal everything we'd built. I sat with that for a moment. My son had spent years telling me I wasn't good enough holding up Ilaria as the measure of everything I failed to be, and all along the woman he worshipped was a fraud with a stolen name and a criminal record in another state. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. That feeling almost sorry lasted exactly until I walked through my front door. It waited in the brass mail slot like a coiled snake. Heavy linen, no return address. Delivered sometime between noon when I'd left for Desmond's office and 6 p.m. when I returned. I picked it up still wearing my coat in the foyer. The weight felt wrong. The embossed logo on the back, some private equity lender I'd never heard of, pressed into the paper like a threat. I opened it standing right there. Formal demand notice. Unregulated secondary lender. Immediate repayment required $340,000. Designated debtor Joyce Myers. The address matched Holloway Bloom's corporate office. My social security number was printed right there on the page. Date of the loan 6 weeks ago, August 1st. I had never signed a loan contract in my life. I read it twice to make sure. The language was dense, deliberately complex. But the essential message was clear. I owed $340,000 to a company I'd never contacted for money I'd never received under terms I'd never agreed to. And they wanted it back in 72 hours. I pulled out my phone and called Desmond, still standing in the foyer coat, still on document shaking in my hand. He answered on the second ring. Desmond, something arrived, I said. A loan demand, $340,000. When? Just now, in my mail slot. I've never borrowed this money. I've never seen this lender before. I heard him moving, probably toward his home office. Read me the lender's name, he said. I did, then the loan number, then my supposed signature date. Stay on the line, he said. I'm pulling up the documents database now. I stood in my foyer wearing my coat, holding a letter that said I owed $340,000 to a company I'd never heard of for money I'd never touched. The house was dark except for the light I'd switched on when I walked in. Empty. Silent. Somewhere across the city, Ernest was locked in room 14. Somewhere else in Boston, Lyle and Ilaria Celeste were counting on this moment to break me. Got it, Desmond said. His voice had gone very quiet. Mrs. Myers, the signature on the loan instrument is a forgery. This is identity theft, federal crime. How can you tell? The secondary lending registry maintains digital copies of all applications. I'm looking at the signature now. It's your name, but it's not your hand. Someone used your social security number, your corporate address, your full legal name to draw down a credit line from an unregulated lender. I sat down on the stairs. My legs had stopped working properly. They turned you into an artificial bankrupt, Desmond continued. On paper, you now have $340,000 in high-interest debt, fraudulent but documented. Can we prove it's fraud? Yes, but not in 72 hours. Forensic handwriting analysis takes weeks. Court filings take time. In the short term, this creates exactly what they want, the appearance that you're financially incompetent and drowning in debt you can't manage. I looked at the letter, at the repayment deadline printed in bold. When does the 72 hours expire? Let me check. A pause. Friday, 9 a.m. Friday morning, the same day as the guardianship hearing. It's coordinated, I said. Yes, 2-front assault. They're trying to break you financially before you can walk into that courtroom. Show up Friday with this hanging over you, and it supports their competency argument. You can't even manage your own debts. How can you manage an $8 million estate? I closed my eyes. 72 hours, Friday morning, the same deadline, the same ambush. What do we do? I file a fraud affidavit first thing tomorrow, Desmond said. Emergency injunction to freeze the debt. Criminal referral to the FBI for identity theft. But Mrs. Myers, even with that, the timeline is brutal. Friday is in 3 days. I know. And there's something else. The loan draws from an unregulated lender operating in a legal gray zone. These companies don't follow normal banking rules. They can be aggressive. The demand letter is just the opening move. What's the next move? Collection calls, threats, possibly showing up at your door. They're designed to intimidate. I looked at the letter in my hand. $340,000. A number designed to be just small enough to sound possible, just large enough to be crushing. I'll file everything tomorrow, Desmond said. Criminal complaints, civil injunctions, the full arsenal. But you need to be prepared. Friday is going to be worse than we thought. They're hitting you from every direction." "I understand." "Mrs. Myers, are you—" "I'm fine, Desmond. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow." I hung up and sat on the stairs for a long moment. 3 days until Friday. 3 days until Lyle and Ilaria expected to walk into that courtroom and watch me sign away everything Ernest and I had built. They'd planned this for 8 months, the life insurance policy on Valentine's Day, the power of attorney 3 weeks ago, the guardianship petition, Ernest's imprisonment, the forged will, and now this, a fraudulent loan to destroy my credit and my competence in a single stroke. Every move calculated, every piece positioned, a chess game played against a woman they thought was too old, too simple, too broken to fight back. I stood up, put the letter in my bag, unlocked the door properly. I'd just pushed it closed when I'd first arrived, too focused on the envelope to turn the deadbolt. Went to the kitchen and made dinner. Pasta. Nothing complicated. I wasn't hungry, but I needed to eat. The cardiologist had been clear. Regular meals, regular medication, avoid extreme stress. I almost laughed at that last part. While the water boiled, I stood at the kitchen window looking out at the dark garden. The rose bushes I'd planted 15 years ago, the lavender that came back every spring, the careful architecture of growth that required patience, attention, years of steady work. Lyle had called me just a flower lady, like it was an insult. Like 35 years of building something real was less valuable than Ilaria's, Celeste's stolen credentials and fabricated sophistication. 3 days until Friday. 3 days until the coordinated assault they'd been planning for 8 months. I ate dinner at the kitchen table alone. Took my heart medication with a full glass of water. Washed the dishes. Normal routine. Normal movements. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not yet. I barely slept Tuesday night. Kept thinking about the fraudulent loan, about Friday, about Ernest in that locked room. The phone vibrated at 5:58 Wednesday morning, unlisted number glowing in the pre-dawn darkness. I swept it up before the second ring because I'd been staring at it for an hour waiting. Hello, Maggie, my old nickname. The one only Ernest used. His voice was raspy rough from days without proper use, but sharp with absolute clarity. Ernest. I sat up, reaching for the pen and notepad on my nightstand. "Are you safe? Can you talk?" "I have 4 minutes, maybe less. Burner phone. Listen carefully." I clicked the pen, ready. "I'm documenting everything," he said. "First night they brought me here, I started faking the sedatives, holding them under my tongue, spitting them out after the nurse left. How long have you been?" "Since day 1. "Maggie, I've been watching. 30 years at the IRS taught me exactly what to look for." His voice dropped lower. "They're running systematic Medicare fraud, double billing under separate corporate codes, cash payments without matching receipts. There's an empty room at the end of the corridor. Midnight couriers, no patients, just money moving." I wrote it down as fast as I could. Corporate codes, cash, couriers. "I documented everything," Ernest continued. "They only let me keep my crossword book. I used the pencil stub they gave me, scratched every transaction into the cardboard backing. Corporate codes, billing dates, courier times, everything an IRS auditor would need to build a case." I stopped writing, looked at the phone. 30 years at the IRS, 41 years of marriage, a blunt pencil stub and a crossword book. My husband wasn't sitting helpless in that room. He was doing what he'd always done, documenting federal crimes with the patience of an auditor who knows exactly how to build an ironclad case. Monday morning. Ernest said, "I left the book open on my bedside table. Dr. Harding came for rounds. I positioned it so he could see the evidence when he leaned close." "What did you say to him?" "I told him, Dr. Harding, I spent 30 years at the IRS. I know what Medicare fraud looks like, and I know the penalties." I heard the small satisfaction in Ernest's voice. He turned white. Ernest continued. "Tried to laugh it off, but I saw him reading what I'd scratched into that book. Corporate codes he recognized. By Monday evening, this phone was under my door. He's terrified." Power reversal. Ernest had taken a man who'd signed fraudulent medical certificates and turned him into an asset. "Your flowers arrived Monday morning." Ernest said, and his voice softened slightly. Red roses, lavender, no card, anonymous delivery. I closed my eyes. I understood every word, Maggie. Every single word. A pause. Hold my ground. Get ready. I'm ready. 30 years. 30 years since we'd built that code during his Chicago audits. Red for advancing, lavender for devotion. A whole language constructed out of necessity and distance, and the particular loneliness of loving someone whose work required secrets. And it still worked, perfectly, across 20 minutes of Boston streets and locked doors. Maggie, there's something else, something important. Ernest's voice had changed, more urgent. I've been listening to the staff, overhearing conversations. Celeste, Ilaria, she's planning to leave Lyle. My hand stopped moving across the notepad. She and Preston have been coordinating an exit strategy. Saturday morning, after Friday's hearing. Once the money's transferred, she'll be gone. Does Lyle know? No. Ernest's voice was quiet. He actually thinks she loves him, Maggie. I've heard him on the phone with her. He believes the marriage is real. He has no idea he's being used. I thought about the life insurance policy, Valentine's Day, the wedding 3 years ago, all of it performance, all of it calculated to get inside our family and take everything. And Lyle, my son who'd called me just a flower lady, had fallen for it completely. He's the mark, I said. Yes, Preston and Celeste ran this scam before. Connecticut, 2018. I heard them talking outside my door Tuesday. They thought I was sedated. They're doing it again, using Lyle as the key to access the estate, then abandoning him with all the legal liability while they disappear. Electronic beeping cut through the line, sharp, urgent. Batteries dying, Ernest said rapidly. Maggie, listen. The crossword book is my insurance. Harding knows if anything happens to me that evidence goes straight to the feds. But you need to be careful. More beeping, faster. Be careful with your heart, Maggie. He meant both. The stent they'd placed 18 months ago, and the organ that had loved him since I was 28 years old. Ernest. The line dropped, mid-breath, just gone. I held the phone against my ear for another 10 seconds anyway, like I could will the connection back through sheer need. Nothing. I pulled it away and looked at the call log. 4 minutes, 11 seconds. In 41 years of marriage, Ernest and I had learned to say everything in 4 minutes when we needed to, or in a single bouquet, or in the way he'd leave his reading glasses on my nightstand so I'd know he'd been thinking about something overnight. We'd compressed entire conversations into moments because his work demanded it, because life demanded it, because 41 years together teaches you how to communicate in shorthand. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. He'd told me he was documenting federal crimes, that he'd blackmailed his own doctor into giving him a phone, that our flower code still worked after 3 decades, that our son was being used by a woman who'd done this before and would disappear Saturday morning, and he'd told me to be careful with my heart. I sat on the edge of the bed holding the phone with both hands. Ernest was in there fighting with a crossword pencil and Medicare fraud evidence and a borrowed burner phone. He'd been active since day one, observing, recording, threatening, building leverage. The least I could do was make sure it counted. I got up and got dressed, made coffee, took my heart medication, normal routine, normal movements. But everything had changed. Ernest wasn't a passive victim waiting to be rescued. He was a federal auditor with 30 years of experience weaponizing the only tools they'd left him, a pencil, a crossword book, and the absolute certainty that he knew exactly how to document crimes. And somewhere 20 minutes away, in a room I couldn't enter, my husband of 41 years was fighting his own quiet war. We just had to make sure we both survived until Friday. By Wednesday afternoon, I knew what I had to do. Make Ernest's war count. Get the evidence where it needed to go. Turn his crossword pencil observations into courtroom ammunition. Candace called at 2:30, said she had something I needed to hear. The way she said it made me drive straight to South Boston. Her office felt different that afternoon. Laptop open on the desk, external speakers connected. Both of us sitting in heavy silence as the audio file loaded. I knew before the first word played that I was about to hear something I could never unhear. Dr. Harding called Detective Rawlings last night. around midnight. He's terrified Ernest's Medicare fraud documentation is enough for federal charges serious time. Harding had his personal attorney on the phone by 2 a.m. By 6 this morning, a preliminary cooperation agreement was signed. This morning, Detective Rawlings had him wear a wire. Candace gestured to her laptop screen. Audio waveforms displayed across the monitor. Your son and daughter-in-law visited Ernest at Pinecrest this morning. 10 a.m. Dr. Harding was in the room, recording the entire conversation. Is that legal? Law enforcement cooperation exception. Dr. Harding volunteered to assist law enforcement as a consenting party to the conversation. Under a court-authorized monitoring order issued this morning by Judge McBride, his recording is legally obtained and fully admissible. He's a participant in the interaction operating under direct law enforcement supervision with judicial authorization. Completely legal. Fully admissible in court. She moved the cursor to the play button. Paused. Mrs. Myers, you need to understand, this is your son's voice, standing over your husband's bed, saying things. She stopped. Just listen. She clicked play. Static hiss filled the speakers, then footsteps, the hard echo of shoes on linoleum, a door opening, voices. Dr. Harding first formal greeting, Mr. and Mrs. Myers, thank you for coming. Then Lyle, my son. The voice I'd heard take first words at 14 months recite spelling tests at 8 call home from college at 19. Dad, this is for the best. Mom can't manage the assets, you know that. I sat perfectly still, hands flat on my knees. Ernest said nothing on the recording. I didn't know if they'd sedated him, if he was choosing silence, if he was documenting this too somehow in ways they couldn't see. Ilaria's voice cut through the speakers, colder than Lyle's, more controlled. Mr. Myers, the sooner Joyce accepts that she isn't capable of protecting the family's wealth, the better for everyone. She called him Mr. Myers, not Ernest, not Dad. Clinical detachment. Every word chosen precisely to establish incompetence for the court record they thought they'd be presenting Friday. Papers rustled in the background. This is simply practical asset management. Ilaria continued. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. My husband locked in a room for weeks. My son standing over his captive father. And it was nothing personal. Then Lyle's voice again. That particular patronizing tone I'd heard for 30 years. Every time I suggested something about the business, every time I had an opinion about investments, every time I existed as more than the woman who'd raised him. You spent your whole career chasing numbers, Dad. Ilaria has a real finance degree. Mom spent hers counting pennies at a flower stand. The audio waveform spiked. Candace stopped the file. Silence rang through the office. Not the absence of sound. The presence of something so loud it took up all the space where sound should be. I stared at the speakers. There's more, Candace said quietly. But that's the essential piece. Your son standing next to his father's bed, calling you incompetent. Calling your business the one you built from nothing penny counting. I nodded, couldn't speak yet. Mrs. Myers, this is the first piece of legally bulletproof evidence we have in your son's own voice. Conspiracy, elder abuse, false imprisonment, all documented through law enforcement channels. Fully admissible. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing didn't change the fact that I'd just heard my 42-year-old son stand over his drugged captive father and dismiss his mother as someone who counted pennies. 35 years, 8 stores, wholesale negotiations and seasonal planning, and 3 recessions survived through actual work, actual strategy, actual competence, reduced to counting pennies at a flower stand by the son I'd raised, fed, taught, loved, protected, sent to college, helped through his first business failure, welcomed back every time, standing over his father's bed, in a room where Ernest was being held against his will, with a woman who had a fake name and a criminal record, calling his mother incompetent. How do you spend 30 years dismissing someone and never once consider that dismissal might be the only thing keeping you from seeing who they really are? Can I get a copy? I asked. Candace nodded. Detective Rawlings is filing it with the court today. You'll have the transcript and the audio file by tomorrow morning." "Thank you." I stood. Candace stood with me. "Mrs. Myers, are you—" "I'm fine." I wasn't shocked. I'd known what Lyle was capable of. The life insurance policy, the forged will, the guardianship petition. All of it proved he'd crossed lines I'd never thought he'd cross. But hearing it, in his voice, with that particular tone, standing over Ernest, that was different. I drove home in silence, didn't turn on the radio, didn't need to. The recording played in my head on repeat. Mom spent hers counting pennies at a flower stand. I played it 3 times, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to hold on to exactly how it felt, this particular cold, clarifying fury, so that on Friday when I sat in that courtroom and every instinct told me to look away from my son's face, I would remember. I had heard it with my own ears. My son had stood next to his father's bed and called me a penny counter. He was about to find out what 35 years of counting teaches you. It teaches you precision. It teaches you when to hold back and when to strike. It teaches you that margins matter, that details compound, that patience wins over panic every single time. It teaches you that the woman who counts every penny doesn't lose track of a single dollar. And it teaches you that when someone underestimates you for 3 decades, they don't see the trap until it's already closed. Wednesday evening, I drove straight from Candace's South Boston office to Desmond's downtown. He'd called saying we needed to meet, strategy session. But when I walked into his conference room at 7:30, I found Candace already there, hunched over the forged will with a magnifying lens, examining it like a surgeon looking for cancer. Her hands were trembling. "Oh my God," she whispered. Desmond handed me a glass of water. My hands were steadier than his. "What is it?" I asked. Candace looked up. "The will isn't just forged, it's void on its face." She turned her laptop screen toward me. Massachusetts Secretary of State database, Notary Public Registry. One name highlighted Marjorie T. Bellingham. Status revoked. Date of revocation, March 18th, 2022. Preston didn't just fake Ernest's signature, Candace said. He used a notary whose commission was administratively revoked 2 years ago for repeated violations. The seal on your husband's will belongs to someone who legally couldn't notarize anything after March 2022. Desmond's pen tapped against his desk in rapid staccato. "Not dead," he said. "Worse, revoked. The Secretary of State maintains a public database. Anyone could have checked. Preston was either incompetent or arrogant enough to think no one would bother." I thought about Lyle standing over Ernest's bed, about the audio recording, about 35 years of being called incompetent. They'd believed I was too trusting to verify anything. This isn't civil court anymore. "Joyce," Desmond continued, "the document crossed state lines Preston's Connecticut office. It involves financial institutions and an $8.5 million estate. It attempts to defraud federal agencies' IRS estate taxes. This is wire fraud, mail fraud conspiracy, federal prison crimes." "How long did Preston think Ernest would stay silent?" I asked. "Or did he plan to keep him locked away until Ernest died naturally?" Candace interrupted. "Then no witness, just a will no one had reason to question." The clock in the hallway chimed 8 p.m. The office building was empty, except for us. Desmond's wall of law books seemed different now, the section on federal criminal procedure suddenly relevant. My phone buzzed. "Text from Lily, Grandma, are you okay? Mom won't tell me where you are. She says you're trying to hurt Grandpa." I showed the phone to Desmond without speaking. He read it and his jaw tightened. "Don't respond yet. Detective Rawlings needs to see this. If Ilaria knows Lily might testify about those Pinecrest visits, this is witness tampering." I looked at Lily's contact photo, school picture from last year, gap-toothed smile, my granddaughter being fed lies, learning to doubt me. How many lies had Ilaria told her in 3 days? Detective Rawlings has enough for a wiretap warrant, Desmond said, pivoting back to strategy. Title III authorization. Preston's phones, Ilaria's phones. The notary fraud establishes probable cause for ongoing conspiracy. The audio recording from Dr. Harding proves coordination. Earnest's physical sequestration proves overt acts. How long does that take? I asked. Affidavit tonight, Candace said. Judge's signature by Thursday noon if we're lucky, then 72 hours of intercept before a next review. We need them to talk before they know we found the notary problem, Desmond added. Preston will warn Ilaria. Ilaria will call Lyle. We catch it all. His keyboard clicked as he started drafting. Legal phrases assembled like weapons. Candace pulled case files precedents for wiretaps in elder abuse cases. Surprisingly thin folder. There's something else, Candace said. She opened her second laptop. I cross-referenced the seal impression. It's a pixel-perfect match to templates sold on 3 darknet forums. Preston didn't make a mistake with a revoked notary. He bought a DIY fraud kit. Desmond laughed, sharp, humorless. Recognition of an opponent's fatal overconfidence. Premeditation, he said. He researched this, shopped for it. How long ago, I asked. Forum's archive shows the template was purchased in July 2023. Candace said, 2 months before Ernest disappeared. The fire alarm shrieked through the building. We all froze. Then Desmond stood. Probably false alarm, but we need to evacuate. 15 minutes on the sidewalk. Office workers streaming out into September evening chill. Some annoyed, some laughing. None of them aware that upstairs in a conference room a federal case was being built. I leaned against the building's cold granite exterior. Sudden exhaustion. Everything's fine until the alarm goes off. Then you find out if the exits work. Your exits are working, Joyce, Desmond said quietly. We're getting you out. Back inside, he finalized the wiretap affidavit. 47 pages. I read through it while Candace printed copies. Subject 1, Lyle Myers, age 42, suspecting conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Subject 2, Ilaria Myers, also known as Celeste Hartwell, age 40, suspect in identity fraud and conspiracy. Subject 3, Preston Blackwell, age 56, suspect in wire fraud, document forgery conspiracy. He's the only one who sounds like a criminal here, I said. They're all criminals now, Desmond replied. The affidavit just makes it official. I remembered Lyle at 12, building model rockets in the garage with Ernest. When did that boy become Subject 1? Detective Rawlings arrived at 10:15, civilian clothes, jeans, and leather jacket. Off-duty but working my case anyway. Preston slipped today, she said. Called Pinecrest twice asking about Ernest Myers' condition and medication schedule. Used your old nickname Maggie from the business records. He's never laid eyes on Ernest Myers. Lyle and Ilaria fed him everything. Preston's just the lawyer running their playbook. Makes him the weakest link, Desmond said. First one who'll flip when we arrest them. How fast can you get the warrant signed? I asked. Judge McBride handles elder abuse cases and moves fast when the facts are this clear, Rawlings said. Affidavit hits her desk 6 a.m. Thursday. Given the flight risk and ongoing imprisonment, I'm requesting emergency authorization. We should have the intercept active by Thursday afternoon. She shook my hand before leaving. Firm grip, solidarity, not sympathy. I drove to the corporate housing apartment I'd been using, didn't want to stay at Beacon Hill where Lyle might have keys. Got there past midnight. An envelope waited on the floor inside my door. No postage. Hand-delivered. I opened it. Single page. Photocopy of Holloway Bloom's corporate bylaws. One section highlighted in yellow owner indemnifies company against legal liability from personal criminal charges. Someone was threatening my business now. Only 4 people had access to these documents, me, my CFO, my corporate lawyer, and Lyle, who had retained a courtesy copy of the old 2019 corporate bylaws before the trust restructure, a detail I had never thought to revoke. I called Desmond at 12:47 a.m. They know we found something, I said. They're moving first. I unlocked the front door of Holloway Bloom's at 6 in the morning, the flagship store empty except for the hum of coolers keeping 2,000 stems fresh. Lily's text had come through at midnight. Can we meet before school? I have something. Please don't tell my parents. She arrived at 6:15, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes red-rimmed but determined. I kept a log, she said, pulling a spiral notebook from her bag. Every time they made me lie to you or Grandpa. Every time they coached me on what to say. I held the notebook like it might shatter. Lily's handwriting filled 32 pages, dates, times, exact phrases. September 14th. Mom told me to say, "Grandpa forgot my birthday." He didn't. September 19th. Dad said, "If I visited you, I couldn't go to Boston College." "Sweetheart, this is evidence," I said. "You understand what that means?" "I understand they're stealing from you," Lily said, "and I'm not going to let them." I called Desmond. He arrived within 20 minutes, Candace Stafford behind him carrying recording equipment. Desmond sat up at the workbench near the orchids, his expression shifting between attorney mode and something gentler. "Lily, I need to explain something," Desmond said. "Anything you tell me today can be used in court. Your parents might face criminal charges. You might have to testify. Do you understand?" "I understand," Lily said. "I want to testify." Desmond opened his legal pad. "Walk me through September 13th, the day your grandfather allegedly signed the new will." Lily's voice steadied as she spoke. "We were at the Newton house. Dad kept saying Grandpa was confused, but he wasn't. Grandpa asked why Preston was there. Dad said it was just paperwork for the business. Then Mom took me upstairs and told me to stay in my room." "Did you hear anything?" Desmond asked. "I heard Grandpa yelling," Lily said. "He said I would never cut Joyce out." Then it got quiet. "When I came downstairs 2 hours later, Grandpa was asleep on the couch and Preston was gone." Candace photographed every page of the notebook. Desmond documented timestamps and witness statements. At 7:40, Lily's phone buzzed. Her school bus was 10 minutes out. "I have to go," she said. "Mom tracks my location. If I'm not at the bus stop, she'll know." I walked her to the door. She hugged me fierce and quick. "I'm sorry I waited so long." "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." I watched her run toward the bus stop, backpack bouncing, and felt something crack open in my chest. Hope maybe, or just the terrible weight of knowing a 15-year-old had more courage than most adults I knew. Desmond's phone rang at noon. "Judge signed the order," he said. "Wiretap goes live in 3 minutes. Preston's cell, Lyle's cell, the landline at Newton." We set up in Desmond's office, Candace at the monitoring station, headphones on software tracking every call in real time. The first 2 hours were mundane. Preston called his secretary. Lyle ordered parts for his Tesla. Nothing. At 2:30, Candace held up one finger. "Preston's on with someone, ordering lunch. BLT no tomato." I felt the air go out of me. We were listening to sandwich orders while my husband deteriorated and my business hung by a thread. Desmond squeezed my shoulder. "Patience," he said. "They'll slip." At 4:17, Candace's eyes went wide. She stabbed the record button and turned up the volume. Ilaria's voice filled the room sharp and clear. "Lyle, listen to me," Ilaria said. "Once the estate clears, you wire the funds to the Lisboa account. I'll already be there." "What do you mean you'll already be there?" Lyle's voice confused, almost childlike. "I'm flying out Monday," Ilaria said. "You follow on Wednesday with the discharge paperwork. We file for Portuguese residency and the U.S. can't touch us." "But what about Lily?" Lyle asked. "What about Mom and Dad?" Ilaria laughed. It was a sound I'd heard at 100 family dinners, warm and performative. Now it curdled. "Lily stays in Boston for school. Your parents are ancient history. This is about us, Lyle. You and me in Cascais, no extradition treaty, $8.5 million to start fresh." "I don't know," Lyle said. "Preston said the will was solid. We don't need to run." "Preston is a means to an end," Ilaria said. "Once probate closes, he's a liability. You do exactly what I say or I walk and you face the charges alone. Are we clear?" Silence. Then Lyle's voice, small and beaten. "We're clear." The line went dead. Candace stopped the recording. Desmond stared at the waveform on the monitor like it was a foreign language. I sat down because my legs wouldn't hold me. "She's going to abandon him," I said. "She planned this whole thing and she's going to leave him holding the bag." Desmond played the recording again. Celeste's laugh echoed the woman my son thought he married. "Your parents are ancient history. My son the perpetrator, my son the victim. The math didn't work, but the evidence didn't lie. We have everything," Candace said. Wire fraud, conspiracy, flight risk. We can move to arrest before Monday. Or we offer Lyle immunity, Desmond said quietly. He flips on Ilaria and Preston testifies about the coercion and we dismantle the whole operation. I looked at him. You want me to save my son after what he's done? I want you to decide, Desmond said, whether he's the architect or the accomplice. I pulled out my phone and texted Desmond the words that would decide everything. We have it. But I didn't text him my answer about Lyle, because I didn't know if I could forgive my son even if it meant destroying him to save myself. Desmond's conference table looked like a crime scene reconstruction, 8 evidence folders marked A through H, each one a nail in my son's coffin. I stood in the doorway at 9 Thursday night, and the room felt like a war room. Desmond stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled. Candace Stafford sat to his right, laptop, open surveillance logs scrolling. Detective Elena Rawlings leaned against the window badge visible on her belt. The timeline board mapped our Thursday in blue marker. Lily's testimony secured, wiretap intercept, captured immunity, offer drafted. We have more evidence than most federal fraud cases, Desmond said. The question is whether we use it all or give Lyle a way out. I set my briefcase down. Show me what you have. Then I'll tell you if my son deserves mercy. Candace walked me through the arsenal. Exhibit A, the voided will with revoked notary seal. Exhibits B through E, asset transfers, mapping $8.5 million stolen in 42 days. Holloway Blooms, our Beacon Hill home. Ernest Retirement Fund, the life insurance. Exhibit F, the forged $340,000 loan. Exhibit G, Pinecrest audio, Lyle threatening Ernest. Exhibit H, wiretap logs of Ilaria planning to abandon Lyle in Portugal. Exhibit G alone. The Pinecrest recording establishes elder abuse and unlawful imprisonment, Candace said. Combined, all exhibits support charges carrying 20 years minimum for each defendant. I picked up the wiretap transcript and read Ilaria's words again. He thinks I love him. That's why it works. My daughter-in-law welcomed into 15 years of family dinners and Thanksgiving tables. She'd been playing my son from the beginning. I reached for Exhibit F. The loan document signatures mine forged and Ernest's. But Ernest's signature stopped me cold. The loops matched his handwriting from 40 years ago before arthritis bent his fingers. I'd seen this exact signature one place, our wedding certificate from 1978, framed in Lyle's bedroom when he was 8. Someone traced this, I said, from the wedding certificate. It hung in his room for 30 years. Desmond leaned forward. You're sure? I hung that certificate so he'd understand what marriage means, I said. He used it to forge a loan that would have destroyed us. The room went silent. Candace stopped typing. Detective Rawlings straightened. My son had turned a family heirloom into a weapon. I set the document down before my hands could shake. Rawlings broke the silence. Judge McBride signed arrest warrants 2 hours ago. Suffolk County Superior Court judge takes elder abuse seriously. 3 warrants, Ilaria Myers, Preston Blackwell, and conditional for Lyle Myers if he refuses immunity. Executable when I asked. Immediately upon hearing conclusion, Rawlings said, 3 deputies, plain clothes, courthouse basement. You give the word Desmond, they're in the courtroom in 90 seconds. Desmond nodded. Ilaria and Preston don't walk out. Lyle walks out only if he cooperates. And if he refuses, I asked. If he chooses Ilaria even after hearing what she said, then he gets arrested with the others, Desmond said. And you'll have done everything you could. Before I show you what Desmond planned for that courtroom, are you still here? Comment A if you think Lyle will flip, or B if he'll choose Ilaria, and add 1 reason. Quick note. The next part contains recreated details for storytelling. The message is what stays. Desmond spread 3 pages across the table, courtroom choreography. You walk in looking defeated, he said. Preston presents the forged will expecting victory. I introduce exhibits one at a time, building to the wiretap recording. Ilaria needs to believe she's winning until that audio plays. Psychological warfare, Candace said. Make them comfortable, then detonate the evidence. I studied the timeline, exhibits A through F by 9:45. Exhibit G, Pinecrest abuse recording at 10. Then Exhibit H, the wiretap at 10:15. Lyle would hear his wife call him expendable while sitting 3 feet from her. 10 seconds to choose sides before Preston heard it too. "You need to look broken when you walk in," Desmond said. "They need to think they've already won." "I've spent 30 years running an 8-store floral business," I said. "I can play whatever role closes the deal." My phone buzzed. Text from Lily, someone else's number. "Mom found my notebook. She knows I talked to you. She's screaming at Dad right now." I showed the screen to Desmond. Ilaria had discovered Lily's testimony tonight hours before the hearing. Rawlings straightened. "Good. Ilaria panicking means phone calls. Wiretap still active. We'll catch whatever she says." "Or she runs," Desmond said. "Portugal plan could accelerate. Alert airport security." Candace was already typing. "Logan and regional airports flagged. If she books a ticket, we'll know." My phone vibrated again. Encrypted message from Ernest's old phone, the one Desmond had smuggled into Pinecrest via Dr. Raymond Harding 3 days ago. 2 words. "Get ready." I read it aloud. "Get ready." Desmond's expression shifted. "He's telling you he's still fighting. 42 days in that place and he's still fighting." Ernest knew tomorrow was endgame. He was signaling he could testify if we extracted him strong enough to face Lyle in court. The victim becomes the witness. The father becomes the weapon against the son. I stood, gathered the exhibits. Tomorrow I would save my husband or lose my son. Maybe both. But tonight the evidence was organized, the warrants were signed, and Ernest was ready. So was I. I left Desmond's office at 10:45, drove past the Beacon Hill home I couldn't enter, and parked outside Holloway Bloom's flagship store. I sat in the dark watching lavender arrangements in the window, tomorrow's funeral flowers, or tomorrow's victory garden. My phone vibrated. Wiretap intercept Candace forwarding in real time. Ilaria's voice to an unknown number. Change of plans, Friday morning before the hearing. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Desmond and started the engine. My phone dragged me from sleep at 5:47 Friday morning. Dr. Raymond Harding's name on the screen meant Ernest, meant crisis, meant Ilaria's change of plans had already happened. "Joyce Ernest is safe," Harding said before I could speak. "But someone tried entering his room at 3 this morning." I sat up in the corporate housing bed, heart hammering. Used a forged medical power of attorney, Harding said. Claimed emergency transfer authorization. Night nurse Gabriela Reyes Sharpwoman, 15 years in elder care, recognized document inconsistencies and refused entry. Called security. Intruder fled. Did they identify him? Male 30s carrying an empty wheelchair and a sedation kit. Harding's voice went flat. Joyce, the kit contained enough propofol to stop Ernest's heart if the dosage was wrong. I closed my eyes. Ilaria's change of plans, not just kidnapping potential murder dressed as medical transfer. They came prepared to move him unconscious. Harding continued, or they came prepared to make sure he never testified. Where is he now? Security's outside his door. I'm calling Detective Rawlings next. I pulled on clothes with shaking hands and called Rawlings myself. She answered on the first ring, already awake, already moving. Harding just briefed me. Rawlings said, "Security footage is being pulled. Forensics is processing the forged power of attorney for Prince. The idiot left the wheelchair, the sedation kit, and the document when the nurse refused him. Does Ilaria know it failed?" I asked. "Not yet," Rawlings said. "Let her walk into that courthouse thinking Ernest's gone. Then we tell her he's testifying. Ernest's under police protective custody, now 2 officers stationed at Pinecrest until the hearing concludes." "What about charges?" "Aggravated kidnapping attempt minimum," Rawlings said. "If the sedation kit analysis shows lethal intent, we're looking at attempted murder. Whoever Ilaria hired panicked when the nurse refused. Amateurs." I thanked her and ended the call. Stood in the apartment's small bathroom staring at my reflection. Relief and rage fought for space in my chest. Ernest was safe, but they'd almost won. Almost stolen him in the night like thieves. I showered. Took my heart medication with steady hands. Forced down toast I couldn't taste. The woman in the mirror looked exactly like what the courtroom needed to see 69 years old, white hair pulled back, exhaustion carved into her face by 42 days of war. I found the lavender sprig I'd saved from yesterday's Holloway Blooms delivery and placed it in a small glass vial, tucked it into my jacket pocket, symbolic anchor reminder of what lavender means. Devotion, also funeral. Today would determine which. Lyle will see his mother old and tired, I told my reflection. He won't see the evidence folders, the arrest warrants, the trap closing around him. 42 years since I'd held him as a newborn. 8 hours until I watched them arrest him or offer him mercy. I called a cab at 7:15. The driver was an elderly man with a Caribbean accent, humming something soft as we pulled away from the corporate housing complex. The September morning was beautiful golden light on brownstone facades leaves just starting to turn. "Beautiful day for it, miss," the driver said, glancing in the rearview mirror. His name placard read, Raymond Torres, 71 driver since 1998. "You heading to the courthouse for jury duty?" I lied. "Yes." "Good on you," Torres said warmly. "Justice system works if good people show up. My daughter served last year, said it changed her perspective on civic duty." He wished me good luck as I paid the fare at Pemberton Square. Mundane kindness from a stranger who didn't know I was about to destroy my family within the system he praised. I entered Suffolk County Courthouse at 8:40. The marble hallway echoed with attorney conversations, families clustered outside courtrooms, justice as bureaucratic machinery grinding forward. I spotted Desmond near courtroom. 7B walked toward him with deliberate slowness. The performance of frailty began now. "Ernest's safe," Desmond said quietly as I reached him. "Rawlings has the intruder's forged document. We're adding it to Exhibit 1, attempted witness elimination." "Where are they?" I asked. Desmond tilted his head toward the opposite corridor. "Across the hall, Preston's holding court. They think they've already won." I saw them then, Ilaria in a crimson designer coat that probably cost $3,000 of stolen money. Lyle in a charcoal suit looking exhausted and hollow. Preston Blackwell in navy pinstripe, radiating corporate confidence, laughing at something. Ilaria's hand rested possessively on Lyle's arm, a tableau of people who believed they were about to inherit $8.5 million. "She doesn't know her 3 a.m. kidnapper failed," I said. "No," Desmond agreed. "She thinks Ernest's gone, thinks we have no witness." I watched my son across the marble hallway. He couldn't even look in my direction. Guilt, or had Ilaria trained him not to acknowledge me? Lyle crossed the corridor toward the water fountain. His path required walking past me. Our eyes met for half a second, his filled with something like apology, mine deliberately empty. He walked past without speaking, mother and son 10 feet apart, acting as strangers. My hand found the lavender vial in my pocket, physical anchor against the part of me that wanted to scream, to grab his shoulders, to demand answers. "Say something," I thought. "Apologize. Tell me Ilaria forced you. Give me one reason to offer you the immunity deal instead of watching you go to prison." He said nothing. The silence was his answer. At 8:52, a court clerk emerged, Margaret Sutton, middle-aged woman with efficient movements and a stack of documents. She walked directly to Preston and handed him a paper. Preston's face shifted as he read, confidence cracking into confusion, into calculation. He showed the document to Ilaria. Her crimson smile faded, whispered conference with Lyle. Then Preston glanced across the hallway toward Desmond and me, an uncertain glance, a man beginning to realize miscalculation, like an overwatered flower rotting at the root before it shows above soil. "He just realized the will is void," Desmond said quietly. "He's trying to figure out what else we know." "Everything," I said. "We know everything." "Not yet, he doesn't," Desmond replied. "But in 15 minutes he will." The courtroom doors opened at 9 o'clock. I watched Preston, Ilaria, and Lyle enter, first Ilaria's crimson coat, disappearing through the doorway like a blood drop in water. Desmond offered me his arm. Last chance to offer Lyle the immunity deal before we go nuclear. I touched the lavender vial in my pocket. Thought of Ernest's message. Get ready. walked through the courtroom doors without answering. All rise. I stood facing Judge Patricia Weymouth across a courtroom that would decide whether my husband was prisoner or patient, whether my son was victim or villain. The immunity offer had expired in my silence. Now we went to war. Judge Weymouth was mid-50s, graying hair, pulled back, reputation for no-nonsense approach to elder abuse cases. She called Suffolk County Probate Court to order case number 2023-PR-08847 voice, carrying the weight of 20 years on the bench. Preston Blackwell stood, navy pinstripe suit, impeccable voice filling the courtroom. Your Honor, Ernest Myers is 72 years old, showing advanced cognitive decline. His wife, despite good intentions, lacks capacity to make medical decisions in his best interest. We're seeking emergency guardianship with Lyle Myers as appointed guardian to execute necessary estate planning. You're seeking emergency guardianship. Judge Weymouth's eyebrows arched. That's an extraordinary remedy, Mr. Blackwell. The circumstances are extraordinary, Your Honor. Mr. Myers requires— Desmond rose smoothly. Your Honor, if I may, the petition Mr. Blackwell filed relies on a will that is void on its face. He approached the bench, filed opposition motion with Exhibit A clipped to the front. The forged will, its fraudulent notary seal, visible even from my seat. The notary listed on this document, Marjorie T. Bellingham, had her commission revoked in March 2022. Desmond said, 24 months before this will was allegedly executed. The document is legally worthless. Judge Weymouth reached for the exhibit, studied the seal under her desk light. The silence stretched 15 seconds. I watched Preston's face shift from confident to confused to calculating. Mr. Blackwell. Judge Weymouth said slowly, did you verify the notary's credentials before filing this petition? Your Honor, I, Preston stammered. The document was provided by my clients in good faith. That's not true. Lyle surged to his feet, chair scraping. Dad signed it in July. I watched him. Judge Weymouth's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Mr. Myers, you will remain silent or I will hold you in contempt. Sit down. Ilaria's hand shot out, gripped Lyle's arm, pulled him back into his seat. She leaned close, whispered something sharp in his ear. He went still, face flushed with panic. Ilaria's expression stayed frozen in crimson composure. I watched from across the aisle. Lyle was terrified. Ilaria was calculating. He didn't know the will was fake. She did. Mr. Blackwell, control your client, Judge Weymouth said. Proceed, Mr. Quincy. The courtroom settled into document exchange, Desmond passing exhibits to the clerk Preston, conferring with Ilaria in urgent whispers. I heard the sounds crystallize around me, clerk's keyboard clicking, HVAC system, humming someone's phone, vibrating despite court rules, mundane soundtrack to family destruction. This sterile room had seen divorces, custody battles, estate disputes. How many other families had sat here watching themselves disintegrate in real time? I touched the lavender vial in my pocket anchor to purpose beyond fear. Mrs. Myers, please approach the stand. Judge Weymouth's voice pulled me back. I walked forward, placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. The whole truth. Nothing but. Desmond led me through September 1st, the morning that started everything. Mrs. Myers explained what happened at 7:15 that morning. Ernest called, I said. Distress call disguised as normal conversation. We developed a cipher 30 years ago when his IRS audit work meant potential threats. Signals embedded in ordinary phrases. What signal did you receive? 8-second warning, I said. He told me he was fine, weather was good, but his signature on the verbal cues had the backward hook, the duress marker. It meant he was being coerced. Judge Weymouth leaned forward. You're testifying your husband sent a coded distress signal during a phone call. Yes, Your Honor, I said. Ernest's federal auditing career required authentication protocols. Our cipher is an extension of professional habit. He was telling me he was under duress at Pinecrest. Preston stood for cross-examination, attempting to salvage credibility. Mrs. Myers, isn't it possible you misinterpreted your elderly husband's confusion? Cognitive decline can create patterns that— "My husband has a sharper mind than any person in this room," I said, meeting his eyes. "Including you, Mr. Blackwell." Judge Weymouth's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "The witness may step down." I walked back to the plaintiff's table path, taking me past the defense table where Lyle sat between Ilaria and Preston. Our eyes met. His face showed confusion, maybe the first doubt about the narrative Ilaria had fed him. He mouthed something that looked like, "I'm sorry," or "I didn't know." I kept walking. Too late for apologies. The evidence train was already in motion. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Candace Stafford," Desmond said. Candace took the stand with forensic precision. Her testimony came like machine gun fire dates, dollar amounts, account numbers, cross-references. Exhibit B1 through B8 show systematic asset theft beginning January 2023. Candace said, total $3.2 million transferred from Ernest Myers' retirement accounts to accounts controlled by Lyle Myers and Ilaria Myers. Exhibit C, fraudulent property deed transferring Beacon Hill home. Exhibit D, $340,000 forged loan against Joyce Myers' residence. Exhibit E, $2 million life insurance policy, dated February 14th, signature forged. Judge Weymouth studied each exhibit as Candace referenced it. "Mr. Blackwell, do you have any explanation for these transactions?" "We'll need time to review." Preston's voice cracked. "This is the first we're seeing." "The first you're seeing," Judge Weymouth's tone could have frozen water. "These are your client's accounts, Mr. Blackwell." During Candace's testimony about the $2 million insurance policy, Lyle's chair screeched backward. Ilaria grabbed his arm, that same possessive grip from the courthouse corridor. Lyle shook her off violently, first physical rejection I'd seen. "You told me that was legal estate planning." Lyle said harsh whisper, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "You said the insurance was Dad's idea. You said—" "Shut up," Ilaria hissed, icy control fracturing. "Right now." He's realizing, I thought. Not everything but enough to know Ilaria lied about the money. Desmond stood. "Your Honor, exhibits F and G are audio recordings. Exhibit F captures events at Pinecrest Private Care Facility. Exhibit G captures subsequent communications between defendants." Preston drew a sharp breath. Ilaria went absolutely still. Lyle's eyes darted between them, watching their reactions, realizing they were hiding something he didn't know. Judge Weymouth looked at Desmond. "Proceed, Mr. Quincy." The courtroom speaker crackled to life. Then Lyle's own voice filled the room. "Listen, old man, you sign what we tell you or you stay here until you rot." I watched my son's face drain white. The recording continued Dr. Harding's wire from Pinecrest, 90 seconds of clinical clarity. Lyle's recorded voice cold and certain. "You're 72 and nobody's coming for you. Mom's given up. Sign the trust transfer or stay here until you deteriorate naturally." Judge Weymouth leaned forward. "Mark that phrase, deteriorate naturally. Continue, Mr. Quincy." The recording played on, Lyle calling Ernest a penny counter at a flower stand, demanding signatures, threatening indefinite imprisonment. Every word captured with wire recording precision, every threat now evidence of elder abuse. That's my son's voice, I thought. That's my baby threatening his father with death by neglect. The recording ended. The courtroom went silent, the kind of silence that has weight that presses down on everyone present. Lyle sat frozen hands covering his face. Ilaria reached for his arm. He flinched away without looking instinctive rejection. Preston leaned close, attempting whispered consultation. Lyle didn't respond, just sat there, hands over his face, shoulders shaking. "Oh God," Lyle whispered to himself, barely audible. "Oh God, what did I do?" Ilaria's voice went low and urgent. "Lyle, look at me. We can explain—" "Don't touch me," Lyle said. I watched from across the aisle. Maternal instinct warred with tactical necessity. My son's world was collapsing in real time, and I'd built the demolition charges. Desmond stood. "Your Honor, Exhibit G is a wiretap recording from Thursday evening authorized under emergency elder abuse protocols. The recording captures communications between defendants." He pressed play. The courtroom speakers crackled again, then Ilaria's voice, crystal clear, ice cold. Lyle served his purpose. Got us inside the family access to the accounts. I don't need him after the money clears. A male voice I didn't recognize. What about when he realizes? Ilaria's laugh, that same warm sound from 100 family dinners, now stripped of pretense. He thinks I love him. That's why it works. He'll be in Portugal explaining fraud charges alone while I'm in Lisbon with a new name. And the mother, Joyce. Collateral damage, Ilaria said dismissively. She had a good run with her flower shops. Poor baby thinks we're building a future together. I'll be gone before he realizes the accounts are empty. The recording ended. 3 seconds of silence so complete I heard my own heartbeat. Then Lyle turned to Ilaria's slow-motion movement like a man underwater reality, viscous and unreal. What? The word escaped him. Not a question, just sound from damaged vocal cords. Ilaria wouldn't meet his eyes. She studied the folio on the table with manufactured concentration pen in hand like she was taking notes. "Look at me," Lyle said. "Celeste, look at me." "This isn't the time," Ilaria said, still not looking up. "You were going to leave me." Lyle's voice broke. "You were going to leave me holding everything." I watched my son's face cycle through confusion, comprehension, devastation in 15 seconds. He'd been the mark all along, not just the tool, the victim. "Your Honor." Desmond said, "The prosecution calls Lily Myers." The rear courtroom door opened. Lily entered from the hallway where she'd been sequestered, walked to the witness stand without glancing toward her parents. She wore her school uniform, white blouse, navy skirt, and carried herself with fragile dignity that made her look older than 15 and younger than she should have to be. Judge Weymouth's expression softened. "Miss Myers, do you understand you're under oath?" "Yes, Your Honor," Lily said, voice steady despite trembling hands. "I'm here to tell the truth about what I heard." 15 years old, I thought, testifying against her parents. What did we do to this family? Desmond led her through testimony with gentle precision. 2 weeks ago, Sunday afternoon, doing homework in her bedroom at her parents' apartment. Overheard conversation through the wall. My father's voice said, "Old man needs to deteriorate naturally before we move him," Lily recited. My mother said, "Shops sold by spring Portugal house by summer." I wrote it down in my log with the date and time. "Lily, why did you write these conversations down?" Desmond asked. "Because I knew it was wrong," Lily said. "I knew Grandpa Ernest needed help and nobody was helping him." She looked directly at Lyle. "I'm sorry, Dad, but Grandpa didn't deserve what you did to him." Lyle's face crumpled. His daughter, his 15-year-old daughter, was testifying against him with more courage than he'd shown in 42 days. Preston stood for cross-examination, voice careful. "Miss Myers, isn't it possible you misunderstood adult conversation?" "No," Lily said calmly. "I have exact quotes in my log. The dates match the wiretap evidence." "You understand you're destroying your family with this testimony?" Lily's voice stayed level. "My parents destroyed it first. I'm just telling what happened." Preston tried again. "Are you certain you want to testify against your parents?" Lily looked at Lyle. "You taught me to tell the truth. Remember when I was little, you said truth matters more than comfort." Lyle's face shattered completely, his own parenting lesson weaponized as testimony. Judge Weymouth's voice cut through. "Mr. Blackwell, that's enough. Witness is dismissed. 15-minute recess." The judge left the bench. Thomas Crawford, the bailiff's stocky man in his 50s with military bearing, stationed himself near the exits. The courtroom stayed seated, nobody quite ready to move. Lyle sat motionless, staring at his hands. Then he turned to Ilaria. "You were going to leave me," he said. Statement, not question. "You used my entire family, my father, my mother, my daughter. You used all of us." Ilaria stood gathering papers. "I need to speak with my attorney. Did you ever love me?" Lyle's voice climbed in slow, structural tear. "Any of it real?" She walked away without answering. Preston followed, whispering urgently. Lyle turned across the aisle toward me. Our eyes met. "Mom," he whispered. My voice broke. "I know, Lyle, I know. I can't." His face twisted. "Mom, I can't undo what I did. He was locked in that place and His voice broke completely. "I wanted to go to him. wanted to wrap my arms around my 42-year-old son like he was 8 years old again. But Desmond's hand touched my arm, gentle restraint. Judge Weymouth returned from chambers, nodded to the bailiff. The court has reviewed the evidence. I'm issuing emergency orders, but first, she looked at me. Mrs. Myers, you've claimed your husband is held unlawfully. I want to hear from him directly. Bailiff, bring in Ernest Myers. The rear courtroom doors began opening. Ernest Myers filled the courtroom doorway thinner by 20 pounds, leaning on an aluminum cane wearing a wrinkled windbreaker, but eyes burning with 42 days of captive rage. The gallery erupted. Spectators standing, murmuring, craning to see the dead man walking. Lyle surged to his feet in reflexive shock, face draining white. Ilaria sat motionless, crimson coat, suddenly looking like a blood-stained eyes calculating whether the rear exit was available. Preston's pen clattered to the table. Judge Weymouth's gavel cracked. "Order! Everyone sit down!" "Dad," Lyle whispered. Ilaria leaned toward Preston's sharp whisper, carrying 3 rows. "You said he couldn't travel. You said—" Ernest advanced down the center aisle cane, clacking marble floor with metronomic precision. Each step a deliberate performance I survived. I remember. I testify. He passed my row. Our hands reached across the aisle gap, locked for 3 seconds of wordless communication. I'm here. I know. We win. Our fingers released. Ernest continued toward the bench without looking at our son. 42 days, I thought. He's thinner, older, damaged, but alive. He's alive. Lyle watched his father pass. "Dad, I didn't know they—" His voice died. No excuse was adequate. Ernest didn't turn, didn't acknowledge his son existed. Detective Rawlings stayed half a step behind Ernest, close enough to catch him if he faltered far enough back to let him own this moment. Ernest stood before Judge Weymouth's bench. Thomas Crawford offered a chair. Ernest refused it. "Your Honor, I'm Ernest Myers, 72 years old, retired IRS senior federal auditor." His voice was steady, prosecutorial, decades of federal testimony training activated. "I was held against my will at Pinecrest Private Care for 42 days. I'm fully competent of sound mind, and I have evidence of federal crimes committed by my son, his wife, and their attorney." Judge Weymouth leaned forward. "Mr. Myers, are you under duress now?" "No, Your Honor," Ernest said. "For the first time in 6 weeks, I'm not." "Tell me what happened." "The will they submitted is forged," Ernest said. "The signature is mine from our 1978 wedding certificate. My son traced it. I never signed any document transferring guardianship to Lyle Myers. I was confined at Pinecrest under false pretenses and threatened with indefinite imprisonment unless I signed asset transfers." "You heard the audio recording?" "I lived it, Your Honor," Ernest said. "That recording is Thursday, September 28th. There were 41 days before it." Lyle stood abruptly. "Dad, I didn't know about the notary fraud Celeste handled." Judge Weymouth's gavel crashed. "Mr. Myers, the younger one, sit down or be removed." Ernest finally turned, looked at his son for the first time. 5 seconds of silence, where father and son locked eyes across the courtroom. Ernest's face showed no anger, no love, just exhausted recognition that this was who his child had become. He turned back to the judge without speaking. "May I continue, Your Honor?" Ernest asked. "He's not forgiving him," I thought, watching Ernest's profile. "Not now, maybe not ever." "Please," Judge Weymouth said. Ernest detailed the timeline with federal auditor precision. Dates, times, document numbers, account transfers. Every financial crime cataloged in his memory, waiting 42 days to be released in open court. When Ernest finished, Judge Weymouth studied him for a long moment. Then she delivered her ruling. This court finds clear and convincing evidence of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and unlawful imprisonment. Her voice carried the weight of judicial authority backed by evidence. The guardianship petition is denied with prejudice. The will dated September 13, 2023 is declared void ab initio. She continued without pause. All asset transfers executed since January 2023 are suspended pending investigation. The estate valued at $8.5 million reverts to original ownership under Ernest Myers and Joyce Myers. Desmond's hand found mine under the table, squeezed once. Furthermore, Judge Weymouth said this court refers the matter to the Suffolk County District Attorney and the United States Attorney for Criminal Prosecution. Charges include elder abuse, wire fraud, document forgery, identity theft, and conspiracy. She looked at Detective Rawlings. "Detective, please execute the warrants." Rawlings stepped forward with 3 uniformed officers. She read from printed cards, voice flat and official. "Lyle Myers, you're under arrest for elder abuse, false imprisonment, larceny, over $250,000 and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent." Lyle stood mechanically as an officer produced handcuffs. "Ilaria Myers, also known as Celeste Hartwell, you're under arrest for wire fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and attempted witness tampering." Ilaria's face stayed frozen. "I want my attorney." "You'll have access to counsel at booking," Rawlings said. "Preston Blackwell, you're under arrest for document fraud, unauthorized practice of law, and conspiracy." "This is outrageous," Preston said as officers approached. "I'm an attorney." "Not anymore, Mr. Blackwell," Rawlings said. "Bar complaint was filed this morning." Officers handcuffed all 3 defendants. Choreographed separation began. Ilaria led through the rear courtroom exit toward holding cells, never glancing at Lyle. Preston through the side door, still protesting. Lyle toward the main exit, passing my table. He paused, looked down at me. I met his eyes and said nothing. Lyle opened his mouth, closed it. Let the officer guide him away. Last view, handcuffs catching fluorescent light as my son disappeared through the doorway. What can I say, I thought. I love you, but I won't forgive this. I forgive you, but you're still going to prison. Nothing works. As Ilaria passed Lyle in the corridor outside, not looking at him, she said clearly, I want my attorney, not Preston, someone competent. The courtroom emptied. Journalists rushing to file stories, spectators dispersing, lawyers packing briefcases. Desmond approached with paperwork. Emergency restraining orders granted, he said quietly. Asset freezes lift tomorrow. Ernest, you're free to go home. Lily appeared from the hallway where she'd been waiting. She walked straight to Ernest, hugged him carefully. Thank you for being brave, Ernest said. Your testimony mattered. Is Dad going to prison? Lily asked. Yes, Ernest said. For a long time. Lily nodded slowly, didn't cry, just held on to her grandfather. Desmond gathered his files. Go home. I'll handle the paperwork. The gallery cleared until only family remained, broken, reconfigured, surviving. We left through the main entrance. Ernest moved slowly, cane clicking marble, but he refused help. Outside, September afternoon sun warmed the courthouse steps. We sat together on the granite, 41 years, married, finally safe, but fundamentally changed. Ernest spoke first. Our son is going to federal prison. Our daughter-in-law was an identity thief who never loved him. Our granddaughter testified against her parents. Long silence. People streamed past us, attorneys, defendants, families, the machinery of justice grinding forward. We won, I said, finally. But what did we win? 7 days after the arrests, I sat in Desmond's conference room realizing I still didn't know my daughter-in-law's real name. Candace Stafford spread documents across the table. Celeste Hartwell is alias number 4 in a documented 15-year fraud career. She slid a photo across. Driver's license from 2008, same face, different name. Born Michelle Brennan, 1983, Hartford, Connecticut. Became Sophia Castellano in 2011, Rebecca Winters in 2015, Celeste Hartwell in 2019. Each identity targeted men with family wealth. How many victims? Ernest asked. Connecticut AG identified 3 between 2011 and 2018, Candace said. Total theft $2.1 million before she met Lyle. FBI file opened 2016, never located until now. I stared at the photo. Michelle Brennan at 25 eyes already calculating. So Lyle never had a wife. He had a professional who saw $8.5 million and executed her longest con. The ceremony was real, Desmond said. Everything else was theater. Ernest studied the report. Michelle Brennan. At least now we know who's going to prison. Candace explained Michelle's methodology research targets via public records, create identity with forged credentials, infiltrate through dating apps, marry quickly, citing romance, isolate husband from family, execute theft file, dissolution, vanish before forensic accounting completes. Previous 3 victims pressed civil suits but dropped them when she disappeared, Desmond said. No criminal charges stuck until now. Why Lyle, I asked, why us 8-store floral chain isn't billionaire territory? Candace's expression softened. You had 3 factors: aging parent, with accessible assets, son with financial access, but weak boundaries, family dynamics strained enough to exploit. You weren't the richest target. You were the most vulnerable. Vulnerable. We'd been marked, studied, selected. Preston Blackwell has been disbarred, Desmond continued. Bank records show he received $340,000 from Michelle between 2022 and 2023. Not legal fees his cut. He wasn't corrupt attorney. He was business partner. Ernest's jaw tightened. The lawyer who helped steal from the elderly should get longer sentences than the thief. Connecticut AG froze $3.1 million in offshore accounts, Desmond said. Preston's facing 20 years federal. His cooperation agreement fell through when prosecutors realized he was full partner. What about the other 3 victims, I asked. 2 are pursuing restitution, Candace said. The 3rd died in 2020 heart attack 6 months after Michelle disappeared with his savings. Candace finished showing Michelle's documentation, sophistication, forged credentials, fake employment history, purchased identity documents. Ernest studied the report, then looked up deadpan. She'd make an exceptional IRS auditor, he said. Attention to detail, document analysis, pattern recognition, wrong line of work. Silence. Then I laughed, short, startled, first real laughter in 3 weeks. Desmond joined, then Candace. I'm serious, Ernest continued. Federal government would have paid her salary instead of her stealing it. Better benefits, too. Ernest, I said, laughing despite myself. That's terrible. Terrible but accurate, he said. She had the skill set, just applied it wrong. We left Desmond's office and returned to Beacon Hill, first time together since Ernest's release. The house felt different. Same furniture, same walls, everything contaminated by knowledge of what happened within them. Ernest moved through the kitchen, commenting on male pile garden overgrowth. Small domestic observations that meant we're reclaiming normal. The basil died, he said, looking out the window. I told you it needed daily watering. The basil is replaceable, I said. You're not. He filled the kettle. I'm going to need therapy, professional kind. I can't sleep without checking locks 3 times. Then we both go, I said. Together. 3 months passed. January 2024 arrived cold and clear. I'd returned to Holloway Bloom's part-time. Ernest attended PTSD therapy twice weekly. Media attention faded. Legal proceedings ground toward sentencing. Life resembled normal, but the foundation was permanently cracked. We had language now, trauma, exploitation, family systems, failure, but vocabulary didn't heal. It just named the wounds. We won, I thought one morning. Assets restored, criminals arrested, safety secured. So why does victory feel like surviving a car crash alive but never quite whole? Mid-January, the postal carrier delivered a thick envelope from Suffolk County Correctional Facility. I recognized Lyle's handwriting, first contact since September arrests 4 months ago. I stood in the hallway holding it for 15 minutes. What is it? Ernest called from the study. Letter from Lyle, I said, from jail. Long pause. Do you want me there when you read it? No, I said. I need to do this alone first. I opened it standing at the kitchen counter. 7 handwritten pages, Lyle's careful script filling prison stationery. No groveling apology, just raw admission. He wrote about believing Celeste was superior because she spoke in grand capital talk while I was just arranging flowers. Acknowledged I'd built 8 stores from nothing, raised him, stayed awake through childhood fevers, visited Ernest's failing mother 3 times weekly. Something infinitely harder and more real than anything I attempted with venture capital that never ventured beyond PowerPoint. He admitted the flower lady dismissal was parroting Celeste's contempt, absorbing her values, betraying his mother for a woman who never loved him. "I don't expect forgiveness," he wrote. "I don't deserve it. I locked my father in a facility and called him disposable. I called you a flower lady like it was an insult when you built an empire from soil and water and discipline I never learned." Final paragraph. Prison gives you time to see yourself clearly. I see now I was a 42-year-old man who never built anything mocking a 69-year-old woman who built everything. That's who I was. That's who's going to prison. I set the pages on the table beside cold tea. He understands, I thought. Finally. 4 months too late, 42 years too late, but he understands. Ernest entered, saw my face. What did he say? I looked at him, then back at the letter. He said he understands what he did. He said he knows why it was evil. Long pause. He asked if Lily will ever speak to him again. The judge asked if defendants had anything to say before sentencing. Lyle stood in orange jumpsuit. I held Ernest's hand. The courtroom waited. Judge Martin Harrison, Suffolk County Criminal Court. 22 years on the bench, silver hair and reputation for firm sentences in elder abuse cases, looked at each defendant in turn. Michelle Brennan refused the name Celeste, now stared forward, said nothing. Preston attempted rambling apology about poor judgment. Judge Harrison cut him off. "Save it for parole hearings, Mr. Blackwell." Lyle stood slowly, faced Ernest and me in the gallery, 20 feet of courtroom space between us. "I don't ask forgiveness," Lyle said, voice steady. "I ask that you tell Lily I understand why she can't see me. Tell her integrity matters more than comfort. I should have lived that. I'm sorry I didn't." He paused. "Mom, Dad, I destroyed what I should have protected. No sentence makes that right. I just need you to know I finally understand that." "Mr. Myers, you may be seated," Judge Harrison said. He understands, I thought. That's not redemption, but it's something. Maybe it's all there is. Judge Harrison read the sentences with bureaucratic precision. Lyle Myers, 8 years federal prison plus $2.8 million restitution for elder abuse, false imprisonment, wire fraud, and larceny. Minimum 6.5 years before parole eligibility. Ernest's hand tightened on mine. Michelle Brennan, also known as Celeste Hartwell, 12 years federal prison plus complete asset forfeiture. Connecticut extradition pending for prosecution of prior victims. Michelle's face stayed blank. Preston Blackwell, 6 years federal prison plus permanent disbarment in Massachusetts and Connecticut. Judge Harrison continued without pause. Additionally, Dr. Raymond Harding received 3 years probation, $200,000 fine and permanent medical license surrender. Pinecrest Private Care Facility dissolved by state order. He looked at the defendants. These crimes represent systematic exploitation of a vulnerable elderly person for financial gain. Such conduct strikes at the heart of family trust society depends upon. Mr. Myers, the younger, you will serve minimum 6.5 years. Use that time wisely. Ernest leaned close, whispered, "He'll be 50 when he gets out. We might not be alive to see it." Federal marshals prepared to lead defendants from the courtroom through separate doors. Lyle stood wrists, shackled, walked toward the exit. At the threshold, he stopped, turned back, found my eyes across the courtroom space. No words exchanged. I offered a single slow nod. Not forgiveness, not absolution, just recognition. "I see you. I acknowledge this. We both survive." Lyle returned the nod, stepped through the door frame. The door closed. 8 years until it might open again. That's my son, I thought. Was my son. Still my son. Language fails when family becomes felony. "Did you just say goodbye?" Ernest asked after the door closed. "I said I survived him," I answered. "That's different." We descended the courthouse steps together, same steps from September 6 months ago. Spring air instead of autumn. Cherry blossoms instead of dying leaves. Ernest commented, "Cherry blossoms don't know your son just went to prison. They bloom anyway." Indifferent, but comforting. "You're philosophizing about trees." 42 days locked in a room gives you time to think about cycles, Ernest said. Trees do it better than humans. I laughed. Realized I was laughing more now, not happiness, but capacity to find absurdity in tragedy. Survival skill, not victory celebration. April through June. Ernest returned to morning shop routine. Armchair by the window at Holloway Bloom's Boston Globe, steel thermos I filled at 6 a.m. We worked 2 hours without talking, completely synchronized like 30 years ago. Me arranging displays, Ernest managing inventory sheets, rhythm of marriage stronger than words. Senior staff who'd worked 15-plus years smiled quietly watching us reclaim space that trauma tried to steal. Celtics lost again, Ernest said one morning reading the sports section. Some things never change. Your sports commentary has not improved with age, I said, arranging roses. 41 years married, Ernest replied. Still surprising, you would be exhausting. Lily Myers, 16, now living with us as legal guardians, apprenticed at the shop twice weekly after school. Learning the business I'd built, wholesale negotiations, seasonal buying, customer psychology. I taught her what Lyle never learned, empire built, from attention to small things repeated perfectly for decades. Grandma, did Dad ever work here? Lily asked one afternoon, learning to arrange peonies. Summer after high school, I said. Lasted 3 weeks, said it wasn't challenging enough. Building something that lasts 40 years sounds pretty challenging to me, Lily said. This child understands what her father never did, I thought. Maybe that's the real inheritance. She asked once if she should visit him in prison. I said, only when you're ready. That might be never. Both answers are okay. My quarterly cardiology appointment arrived in May. Dr. Helen Stevens, my cardiologist for 8 years mid-40s with efficient manner and kind eyes, reviewed my charts. Whatever you changed in your life 6 months ago, keep doing it, she said. Stress reduction shows measurably in your cardiac function. Resting heart rate down, blood pressure, stabilized inflammation markers, improved. Your heart literally thanks you. I arrested my son and sent my daughter-in-law to federal prison, I said. Apparently my cardiovascular system approves. Dr. Stevens paused. Sometimes the healthiest thing we do is remove toxicity, even family toxicity. Medical proof that surviving family destruction has physiological benefits. Winning the lawsuit saved Ernest's life. Ending the lawsuit saved mine. Justice as medicine, literally. June brought us to Desmond's conference room one final time. Restitution payments and seized assets totaled $6 million. After legal fees and Connecticut victim compensation, $1.4 million remained. Ernest and I signed the charter establishing the Holloway Dignity Fund pro bono legal representation for elderly facing financial exploitation coordination with Massachusetts Elder Affairs training programs for memory care workers, mandatory monitoring protocols. Board included Desmond Detective Rawlings and elder law specialists. I was appointed advisory board chair. The fund perpetuates in Ernest's name, Desmond said. Stolen assets transformed into protection for other families. We can't undo what happened to us, I said. But maybe we prevent it happening to someone else. Ernest looked at me. Practical, unsentimental, effective. That's the woman I married. Late June evening, I walked home from Holloway Bloom's carrying a lavender sprig Ernest bought at the Newbury Street florist. For old time's sake, he'd said, handing it to me with that familiar smile. You could have just called instead of the whole crossword code business, I said. Where's the poetry in that? I put the lavender in my jacket pocket, smelled it walking Boston streets. 30 years later, same code, same flowers, different meaning. Not a distress signal anymore, just memory of when it was. Survival smells like lavender. Exactly 1 year since Ernest's 7:15 distress call, I woke to find him sleeping peacefully beside me. Same date, different universe. September morning light came through the same bedroom windows. Same autumn gold I'd seen 365 days ago when the phone rang and the world fractured. Today, reading glasses on his nightstand, soft snoring, ordinary sounds that would have seemed impossible last year. 1 year ago this minute, he was calling from Pinecrest. 1 year ago, I had 8 hours before I knew he was alive. Today, he's snoring beside me, complaining about the Celtics. He woke, caught me watching. You're staring. I'm not that interesting asleep. You are to me, I said. Coffee. We sat on the back porch with morning tea, autumn crimson returning exactly as it was last year, meaning changed. Wooden deck, steel thermos, same Boston Globe subscription. Neither of us mentioned the anniversary explicitly. Both knew, both felt it. Silence of shared survival more eloquent than commemoration speeches. Patriots lost again, Ernest said, reading the sports section. 40 years of disappointment teaches acceptance. Are we talking about football or marriage? Both, and neither. He didn't look up. You know what I mean. I did. My phone chimed. Text from Desmond with Holloway Dignity Fund inaugural year, metrics 47 families protected from financial exploitation, $4.3 million in assets secured, 8 criminal indictments, filed 3 memory care facilities, restructured under new state oversight. Abstract numbers representing concrete lives saved. I read the metrics, silently set the phone down. Ernest glanced over, saw the screen return to his newspaper. Understanding flowed without speech. 47 families didn't lose what we almost lost, I thought. That's not redemption, just math with human faces. Lavender looks good this year, Ernest said after a moment. You planted it in May. It does, I did. Both of us understood the conversation was about more than lavender. I looked at the garden lavender, 5 months growth, now thick, purple blooming in autumn. Same plant that was distress code 30 years ago, funeral arrangement last year. Now just garden feature growing because that's what plants do. I'd spent a year waiting for lavender to mean something profound. It just grew. Maybe that's the lesson: things grow if you water them. Metaphor, unnecessary. October afternoon found me kneeling in the courtyard garden planting white rose starters. Same strain from 35 years ago, visual echo of where this story began. Ernest watched from his deck chair with a biography, pages turning slowly. Silence of steel tool in soil wind through dying leaves, seasonal cycle indifferent to human drama. My hands in cool earth mine drifting backward without anxiety through the year's watershed. Moments courtroom arrests, sentencing the fun Lily's apprenticeship. You're planting the Austin roses again, Ernest observed. Those take 3 years to bloom properly. I have 3 years, I said. Maybe more. Might as well plant them. Optimist. Realist with trowel. Lily slipped through the garden gate with her camera school photography project. She was 16 now, living with us full-time, becoming herself in ways that surprised me daily. Stay still, Grandma, she said, framing a shot. You look like you belong there. I do, I said. She composed the image, grandmother kneeling in garden, one hand in soil, face turned toward afternoon light. Later, viewing the photo, I said, I look old. You look like you, Lily said. That's better. The photo captured a woman who went through something and came out still planting. Not triumph, not tragedy, just continuity. November brought Lyle's 43rd birthday. Second one in federal prison, 6 years remaining. The phone rang, collect call from the facility. I didn't answer. Ernest asked if I wanted to talk about it. I said no. Lily asked if we should send a card. I said, you decide for yourself. I've decided for me. Boundaries as self-care. Forgiveness not required for survival. Some doors stay closed not from anger but from exhaustion. He's still your son, Ernest said quietly. Yes, I said, and I'm still alive. Both things are true. Only one requires my attention today. Lily looked at me. Is it wrong that I don't miss him? No, sweetheart, I said. It's honest. That's never wrong. December evening arrived with winter darkness at 5 p.m. Ernest fell asleep in his wingback chair, biography on his chest. I stood at the living room window looking into the dark garden where white roses and lavender were dormant silhouettes. Let me tell you something. My son called me a flower lady. Meant it as limitation, small, slow, out of place in his world of capital ventures and PowerPoint presentations. He wasn't wrong about the flowers. I've spent 35 years learning the patience of growing things, when to give light, when to hold water, when to cut back, so something else can reach the sun. Lyle thought he was taking everything. Didn't understand the most valuable thing I owned wasn't in an account he could drain. It was 41 years building a life with a man who writes love in flower language. A granddaughter who testified at 15 because truth matters. Knowledge quiet and certain as winter roots that I was still here, still growing, still myself. The Holloway Dignity Fund protected 47 families this year. That number will grow. Not because I'm special, but because I learned something Lyle never did. You build slowly, root deep, tend patiently. Quick money drains away. Slow growth lasts. If you're reading this and you have elderly parents, check on them. Not birthday calls, finances, documents, power of attorney, whether caregivers actually protect. And if you are elderly, you're not invisible, not a burden, not an asset waiting to be divided. You are the root. Everything grows from you. I draped a blanket over Ernest's shoulders, walked to the kitchen for nightly tea, stood at the dark window looking at white roses and lavender silhouettes nodding together in December wind. Dormant now, but roots alive beneath frozen ground, waiting for spring that always comes if you survive winter. My son called me just a flower lady. He was right, and he will never know how much that word contained. And to you listening to my story, remember this survival isn't the same as victory, but sometimes it's enough. Looking back, I wish I'd recognized the warning signs sooner. When Lyle started distancing himself from family gatherings, when Celeste Michelle began controlling every conversation about Ernest's health, I told myself it was normal adult boundaries. Don't make my mistake. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even when that something involves your own child. This wasn't about grandma revenge, though that's what some might call it. This was about protecting a 72-year-old man who couldn't protect himself. I learned that loving your children doesn't mean accepting their cruelty. I learned that 40 years of building a life can be stolen in 42 days if you're not vigilant. And I learned that the right people appear exactly when you need them. Desmond, Candace, Detective Rawlings, even young Lily finding her courage at 15. God placed each piece together when it mattered most. What looked like grandma revenge to outsiders was really just an old woman refusing to let her family be destroyed without a fight. If you're caring for elderly parents right now, check their documents. Know who has power of attorney, ask questions when caregivers seem controlling, or family members discuss inheritance too eagerly. If this story moved you, please leave a comment, tell me what resonated, or share your own experience. If you know someone who needs this message, share it. And subscribe to Her Family Revenge for more stories about family betrayal and survival. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story includes fictionalized elements for impact, but the lesson about protecting our elderly is real.